Welcome to the July 7th work session of the Salisbury City Council. We have a packed agenda tonight, so we're going to have to move through all of our items fairly swiftly. We've got some guests with us for the first couple items. So I'm going to go ahead and invite Mr. Ketterman to come forward and join us with your colleagues. So Sam and Joe, if you wouldn't mind coming to join us. How are you, gentlemen?
Good afternoon, just fine, thanks.
Nice to see you. Purpose of our conversation today is primarily educational, thank you, to discuss our future as it relates to our debt. We realize we have the rather significant item in our wastewater treatment plant coming on very soon, and I thought it would be wise for us to begin to start to have some educational conversations about our debt and our financing structures and options into the future. So this could be the first of several discussions, and I realize you're working closely with staff, but I thought it would be important to bring council into the mix at some point, purely from an educational standpoint. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, and there may be some questions, but the floor is yours.
Joe, you want to start off, please?
Sure, great, thank you. Joe Mason with Davenport and Company. To my immediate left is Sam Ketterman. Good to be with you all this late afternoon. What we thought we'd do, I mean, we've had some preliminary conversations with Council President Day, and, whoops, close to it maybe? Feedback from your computer.
Is it really?
Okay. Electronics are great. It's oftentimes. Sometimes when they don't work.
There's some feedback to my computer right there. Go on.
Okay, fair enough. We've had, as I said, some preliminary conversations. There are a variety of different projects. They're in some form or another of discussion and development in terms of downtown revitalization, downtown redevelopment. I think it's fair to say some of these are medium to longer term items. Some are, if the funding could be found over the near term, that they're things that would be very much desirable to do, particularly in light of the fact that interest rates remain relatively very low, and it's a good time if a local government is feeling good about its finances and so forth. It's a good time to sort of get out there and get some things done. Construction costs are still relatively favorable, as are interest rates, like I mentioned. But in the context of that, we also have to recognize that there's not an infinite amount of money and an infinite amount of borrowing capacity that's available. And we wanted to talk with you a little bit around some concepts, some things that we think it might be prudent and important for this council to do as it thinks about a multi-year plan of finance for the downtown revitalization. It really, again, as I think it was said by Mr. Day, he put it well, this is the beginning of a conversation. We're happy to go back and sharpen our pencils and do some analysis and bring that back before you. And we want it to really be driven in part not only by our recommendations and the way we would suggest that you do some things, but also by feedback from you and things that you want to know. So give us our marching orders, I guess is the thought, and this will be a multi-phase effort over the course of the next several months. Sort of it in an overview, I'm going to talk a little bit about Davenport, just a brief commercial. Some of you have seen us before when we've done financings for the city over the last 2 or 3 years. Sam and later on me have been fortunate enough to be working with the county here for a great many years. So this is a room that's very familiar to us, but we wanted to have you have a little bit of an understanding about who we are and what our capabilities are and what sorts of things that we do. And then I'm really going to turn it over to Sam to talk about one of the main tools that might be available to you as you think about economic development strategies going forward. So with that, if you would turn with me to page 3. We were founded, believe it or not, in 1863 in Richmond. The rumor is we were selling Civil War bonds at the time. I can't verify that, but we did celebrate our 150th anniversary just last year. Been around for quite some time. We are primarily by trade a brokerage firm, but we do have a separate and distinct public finance department of which Sam and I are members. Page 4, this is our team as you see it. We do have offices in Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina. We've probably got one of, if not the largest, practices for financial advisory firms in the Mid-Atlantic. So we bring a wealth of experience and a wealth of different backgrounds to bear. Some of Mr. Ketterman used to be with Baltimore County doing debt and cash management. I spent part of my career in state government in the Midwest. We've got folks that have served as senior accounting professionals, bond lawyers. So we've got a sort of a diverse group that I like to say that there aren't too many problems in public finance that we haven't in one way or another touched over the years amongst our group. So if Sam and Joe don't have the immediate answer, we've got a lot of good partners we can call on to serve the city.
Before Joe moves on, I just want to throw out, we have an analyst by the name of Charles Havelston. He's the grandson of the late Charlie Havelston, who was at one time the county auditor for Wycomico County, out of our North Carolina office.
Thank you, Sam. Pages 5 and 6 I won't dwell on, just gives you a sense as to how active we are in this marketplace. Despite the fact that we are operating primarily in a 3-state trade area, we, by virtue of Paramount, we're one of the larger financial advisory practices in the country. Page 7 is really where I want to spend just a moment, if I could, before I turn it over to Sam. And this is a sort of a list of services provided. It's not intended to be exhaustive, but this is sort of where the conversations that we've had with Mr. Day and others thus far, this is where we sort of intersect with the city and what your goals and aspirations are. So if you're thinking about a multi-million-dollar set of investments, there may be any number of different tools you could use within the confines of the city's charter, both in its current form or potentially revised down the road. You could use the tool of general obligation bonds, which you do for a variety of different things. That's one tool to get some things done, and that may be the best and primary tool for certain elements of projects that you want to do. But there are other tools in the toolkit. We can go through and step through some of those things for you, but we view our role as sort of the quarterback of the process. You need to have a good sense as to what your debt affordability is, where you are currently, if you take on certain projects, where you are likely to be 5 or 10 years down the road. We can do all of that modeling for you. We can tell you for a given number of dollars in projects financed over a certain period of time, what the total gross tax rate impact, for example, would be, so that you know as a council going in, if we say yes to this, it's going to cost us Y. And I think it's our preference where, if at all possible, I mean, this dialogue we're having here today, so far it's a monologue, but this is an opportunity for us to be with you on the ground floor and help you shape this and achieve the goals that you're setting out to do. So amongst these various services would all be things that we would do for you over time. Some are planning, pre-project types of services, modeling and thinking about opportunities. Some of it is just thinking about and informing you and educating you on what are some different financing mechanisms away from just your general obligation bonds. Could be special taxing districts, just a variety of things. So that's really what we're sort of bringing to the table. And on page 8, we just give you a representative sampling of the idea behind the slide is just to show you for various clients, we've done a variety of different things, and we would, in addition to assisting you with the current financing with the fire station and a potential refunding of some outstanding debt, that's a transactional level of service. This work, the planning work, if you will, would be another level of service that we can bring to the table. So with that, let me turn it over to Sam to talk a little bit about special taxing districts. And once we're done with that overview, our thought was we wanted to spend just a little time here up front letting you know about us and what we do, and then turn it over to you for questions and have it become more of a conversation. So Sam?
Thank you, Joe. Folks, if you would be kind enough to turn to page 13, this is a section we're going to address now on tax increment financing and economic development. Show a little bit about our experience on page 14. Those are transactions that we have concluded with Davenport and a number of jurisdictions across the state. If you look down the list of issuers on the left-hand side of the page, you'll see that they come in all shapes and sizes, if you will. We've had jurisdictions as small as town of Riverdale Park, which only has a few thousand residents. It's now in the process of coming to conclusion on a $4 million tax increment financing. And the city of Frederick, talking about sizes, Frederick, the second largest city, did a transaction of $2.5 million. Brunswick, another municipality in Frederick, did a transaction of over $36 million. And I'll call your attention to the transaction at the top of the page. The city of Annapolis, back in 2005, they did a TIF transaction for $25 million. And then last spring, we were able to refund that transaction, creating a situation whereby the city and the county saved millions of dollars in debt service by virtue of the fact that the project had matured and it had developed to a degree where the city was able to refund it and save considerable debt service in the process. So TIFs have been done by a variety of jurisdictions across the state. They have all of those transactions that you see on page 14 have been successful. They continue to operate, and they continue to pay the debt service by virtue of the accumulation of the tax increment that is generated each year by the improvement in the assessable basis. Page 15 starts to talk about some of the policy considerations, part and parcel of a TIF. We suggest that clients develop policy simply so that they can weed out, if you will, projects that are not consistent with the plan, that are not consistent with expectations, and have little chance of success. And we would propose to develop a series of guidelines that work for you. We don't make these so onerous and difficult that you're going to be turning away legitimate projects, but you don't want to be taking up time dealing with projects that have no chance of success either. We would serve as the gatekeeper to evaluate along with your legal team to make sure that they pass muster. On page 16, as part and parcel of the process, we would assist in measuring the financial impact on the jurisdiction's finances. The last thing that we want to see is a TIF that's a millstone around your financial neck, so to speak. These transactions are supposed to be standing on their own 2 feet. They should be bringing in additional revenues to the community and should not be weighing down the operation of the finances. We would also assist with debt structuring. There are particular transactions that are customized and don't lend themselves to the normal level debt service that that very many municipalities use. We would also assist in the underwriter selection and negotiations with the other services that are required, such as bond trustee and legal services. Davenport's role would also require our participation with the drafting and review of the various offering and disclosure documents, and those are listed on page 17 at the top of the page. There are quite a few. There are a lot of participants in the transaction, and part of the process would be for Davenport to analyze the work of each one of those and give a recommendation to the city as to how they should next proceed. Page 18 shows the benefit. These transactions are well established. They've been done in quite a few jurisdictions, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe 49 states allow creation of TIFs and CDAs. They're a practical tool for development in limiting areas. There's no direct burden to the larger community, certainly no use of general fund money, and it has the potential to encourage infrastructure development and to increase the tax base. It also allows for the developer to do a quicker build out of infrastructure by the use of tax exempt financing, and can certainly assist in the jurisdiction's future plans. The developer has the benefit by virtue of the fact that they're able to borrow on a tax-exempt basis, something that they're not able to achieve with a commercial bank. Certainly, there are issues that have to be considered, that every jurisdiction is not looking at every transaction with rose-colored glasses. Growth can obviously strain municipal resources and accelerate residential growth, and there are implications for that in terms of traffic congestion, school overcrowding, and need for public safety and the like. Inasmuch as the city has very few public bond sales, this next item probably isn't an overwhelming concern, but CDA and TIF debt is considered to be overlapping and would be a credit concern if the city went gangbusters and allowed everything that came in over the doorstep to be done. Locally, the jurisdiction is required to collect special assessments on part of the CDA, and that, of course, will possibly generate additional staff time. However, with these transactions, you are permitted to charge what I would call a user fee, so that to a certain degree you are compensated for the additional work that's required for the successful operation of these transactions. Historically, CDAs have been commercial developments, but some have included residential components. And in the case of over half the transactions that we saw in 14, they had a residential component of a significance as well. And actually, the next bullet, current trend has been to utilize them for major residential developments as well. But of course, the recent recession had a major impact on those. And for the longest time, we saw no CDAs and TIFs being done simply because there was little or no market for expanded real estate sales, and there was no market for the sale of a TIF to investors as well. I think that for the most part, we've covered page 20. Page 21 simply shows who's involved, if you will. At the bottom of the page shows the various and sundry additional professionals that are required to participate. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, part of the Davenport charge would be to help select the professionals and make recommendations to the city for the retention of those folks. In the appendix, we've attached two TIF policies. One is from Anne Arundel County. We actually helped to generate that policy many years ago as Anne Arundel started down the road to doing TIFs, and they've done quite a few if you refer back to page 14. It's pretty straightforward. There's nothing magic about it. On the other hand, if you turn to the next appendix, Appendix B, this is Prince George's County. And Prince George's County decided to do something a little bit differently. They have created or installed, if you will, a number of social goals in their particular TIF policy, and it's rather rigid in the requirements and in some cases difficult for the developers to meet, but it is something that the county has required, and apparently it's working very successfully. Again, some of the TIFs that you saw in 14, in the case of Riverdale Park, for instance, that is a Prince George's County transaction as well. And the proposed TIF for the city of Bowie, Carrington, is also Prince George's County. And what they wanted to do was essentially to make sure that certain classes of individuals in the community were well served by the county applying its tax-exempt financing opportunity for a developer. So they've done their best to make sure that all segments of the community benefit from these transactions.
Can you do me the favor of differentiating between? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, fine.
Okay.
Can you do me the favor of differentiating between the CDA and other special taxing districts?
A CDA is a special taxing district. It's primarily the authorizing legislation that determines that.
Okay.
And by the way, when you do a TIF, typically where there should be a CDA created underneath as another level of security, so that it's a TIF and a CDA transaction that are done simultaneously to help secure the project for the community.
Okay.
So just to put a little bit of a finer point on that, a community development authority under state law allows you to levy a special assessment. So that's the ultimate backstop for bonds of this type. You can also overlay a tax increment district on top of that with the idea that let's say, for example, you wanted to carve out part of the downtown area as a tax increment district, and you put in a bunch of infrastructure or did some streetscaping or things to beautify, and with the hopes of attracting businesses downtown or residents, what have you. And if the tax increment, it would certainly be designed and would be optimal if the incremental new revenue from all of those improvements were sufficient to service the debt service on the bonds. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, okay? But the special assessment available to you under the CDA, if the TIF increment revenue in any year is not sufficient to pay that debt service, then the property owners within that CDA would have to pay the special assessment. So it's really sort of a belt and suspenders kind of a setup, if you will. And we realize that these aren't the only development options available to you. They happen to be a very prominent one that's been successfully used throughout the state. They're not the only one. A lot of folks are thinking about public-private partnership opportunities. Those come in a variety of different flavors. Our role is typically to be, as an advisor, on your side of the table, protecting your interests, because we know the developers and the folks that are submitting proposals for those have their own legal teams and their own sorts of experts that are helping them develop their pricing and so forth. And just as a complete aside, more likely than not, meaning probably 95% of the time or more, you as a locality can do whatever financing is necessary under a P3 or a public-private partnership more cost-effectively than the developer can. Number one, you've got tax-exempt options, and number two, you're an established municipal corporation under state law. You're not going anywhere, and you're likely to drive a better bargain with investors than a developer might. So, they're good procurement ideas, and they're good ways for the public and the private sector to work together to sort of horse trade over what may be in the developer's interest. They may want access to lower cost capital. They may want development rights for something you've got. If you've got spare land or air rights over a certain asset, they may want that in exchange for giving you something that you want. And it's our job, working with you and with legal counsel, whether it be staff counsel or whether it be outside counsel, to structure a deal that properly aligns all of those interests, so that if things go haywire, it's not you folks that are on the front lines trying to explain what went wrong, that there are enough safeguards built in, that everybody's incentivized to do the right thing and get the project done and open for operation. So,
Joe, another question. In these examples shown, just to put these numbers in context of, $28 million at Arundel Mills, and another $30 million at Arundel Mills, and $36 million at Brunswick Crossing. What is the increment in those cases, just to understand, to put it in context? What is the increment? What is the special tax paying for?
It is paying for the public infrastructure.
Okay.
So that a developer wants to come in and redevelop part of the city, they can only use the public infrastructure, roads, bridges, water and sewer, things of that nature, projects that the city would undertake itself. None of the money can be spent for private use projects. None of the residential component, none of the office component, none of those projects can be used with public money, for public money.
You were talking about PG County and Anne Arundel County having used TIFs, and you said something about accommodating classes?
No, I meant that the folks in Prince George's County decided that all their residents should benefit by the fact that they've created this social goal type of TIF policy, whereby local businesses are supposed to be included in the TIF as well. That is, contractors and tradesmen that are in the county have to be employed by the developer as they carry out their project.
Yeah, I see something here about a Class A apprenticeship program for each trade or classification listed.
Some of those are a little bit difficult to.
That's a lofty goal.
Yes, indeed, and I understand that they have workarounds, but so far we've not been involved in any of those as yet.
We're not endorsing either one of those policies, other than to say we had a hand in doing the
These are
Anne Arundel one. It's
Used as examples, I understand.
Yeah.
just an example.
But I'm glad that you did include them as examples, to tell the truth. Yes. Thank you.
Certainly.
Other questions?
Yes. You were laying out that there were other options in doing something similar to this. TIFs, we know, can be successful, but they would need to be limited in their use. Ask the state of Illinois that went crazy with TIFs and has had tax issues as a result of it.
All the more
Revenue
reason
issues.
to develop a policy and practice and procedures.
Could you, not necessarily today, but in the course of things, talk about those other options? And also, you had mentioned safeguards, because one of the things that we need to make sure of in any undertaking is that we have the taxpayers protected. They should not be involved in real estate speculation.
Of course not.
So if you could help us understand what those safeguards would be, what other options there might be, how you get those safeguards into place, and, what's the downside of doing it through the TIF methodology versus using another one?
Well, as Joe mentioned, there are a variety of other options that you have, but let's go back to the TIF again. Underlying the TIF security is also the CDA that Joe mentioned. So that means, again, the owner of the property is responsible for payment of the special taxes. Now, one of the things that we do as part and parcel of our responsibility as serving as financial advisor, we examine the financial wherewithal of the developers involved. So, and they are required to give us their financial statements, audited financial statements, so we can determine whether or not they have deep pockets enough to pay the debt service on the CDA, if it comes to that. So there's a level of protection that you have in addition to the revenue generated by the TIF. The other thing is, and I'm not saying this, don't take this lightly, but if the transaction fails, if it defaults, it's not on the backs of the city taxpayers. It is the developer who loses it. And the city has a right to sell the property at tax sale, just like you would any other property that's defaulted on its property tax payments.
Which is not to say that it wouldn't be a mess, that we'd be reading about it and it'd be ugly, because if a project fails and everybody wants it to succeed, but for whatever reasons, economically, it just wasn't the right time, what have you, things sometimes don't work out. It's the old saying, the battle plan never survives the first shot, right? So sometimes these things don't work out, or they take longer to work out than originally hoped for. Sometimes it can be messy, but Sam is correct. They are non-recourse bonds to the general taxpaying public. It's the folks that, and the people that are the owners, a majority of them, if not a higher percentage, I don't recall exactly, but at least a majority of the homeowners have to agree to have the special assessment attached to their property.
66 and 2/3% have
Thank
to approve it.
So it's not like they don't know going in, but they have an incentive to do that, because the hope is that the improvements that are funded by the TIF bonds will help their bottom line down the road by virtue of higher traffic, greater business success, or growth in the value of the property, whether residential or commercial. So.
Right, well, we know that the TIF, however, at least especially in the early years of its repayment, that your tax revenues are different than it would be if they weren't there. And the city has done a couple of TIFs, one of which never came to fruition, no development got done. In fact, we could use an update on that one, Mr. Stevenson. And there was another that defaulted. I would love to have your opinion on those two and just see, you know, what might the city have done better? Is there anything that could have been done differently? You know, so in looking at this, and I'm assuming that the concept of this discussion, I apologize for being late due to work, deals with the downtown area. Is that what we're having realistically a discussion about?
Really, anything. I thought starting off before we ever get to downtown or anywhere else, I thought a little education would be good for all of us. But yeah, I think ultimately that's the geographic area where the most interest in development, particularly public-private partnerships, would be in. Yeah.
We're not in a position to comment on the existing TIFs. We weren't involved. We don't have the data on them. But there are reams of information that are required in order to do a TIF. One thing that is required is a demand or market study to show that, in fact, that this particular project has merit, that it has chances of success, and that it meets the standards of the city's plans. In addition to that, there's an appraisal. You have a market study, then you have an appraisal to come in and say, okay, that market study is correct. It does show that it works, but then this appraisal comes back and says, yes, it's going to generate X dollars over the period of time that it takes to complete the project. Then there's another study, an engineering report that says, yes, all the infrastructure that's identified in this demand study will be built based on the size of the bond transaction that's generated for the TIF. So there are a number of processes that you have to go through in order to finally come to the conclusion that the TIF is working. And that's something that the city's team will be reviewing as the documents are prepared. It's not just a developer coming in and saying, okay, here are my plans, let's get a TIF created. There are a lot of professionals that are involved, as I said a few minutes ago, a lot of evaluation done, and it's not something that happens in a month or 2 months. It's a long, tedious process before you come to the conclusion that it works or doesn't work.
Who typically are those professionals and who are they secured by?
Well, they're
For
professional.
example, the market study that you mentioned.
There are various firms that do that. They're located in, well, the ones we've worked with are located in Washington or Columbia. The appraisers, same thing, either Columbia or Washington, D.C., and they've been in the business for a very long time. Engineering firms, there are all sorts of professional engineering firms that are capable of doing this sort of work. The ones we've worked with have been in Montgomery County or in Frederick. So there are professionals that have been involved in a number of these transactions that are cited on page 14 that have done a decent job.
I think what you're really referring to is if you wanted to go, and I have no idea how the first two TIFs that were done here were done, as Sam said, we weren't involved, but if it was done sort of locally with a financial institution, they may have a different standard of disclosure and study and analysis. All the transactions that Sam's referring to with these various studies were bonds that were sold in the public market. Granted, they were not out of, right away, they were not investment grade caliber credits. They were, in other words, they were higher risk, deemed higher risk, and everything was labeled that, you know, you must have a minimum net worth of probably at least $100,000, and you know, this is a risky investment for the following reasons, but all these studies are designed to give an informed investor enough information to say, yes, I want to go into this eyes wide open, knowing what those risks are, and still want to make the investment. So,
and those investors are, a lot of them are, as Joe mentioned, high net worth individuals or insurance companies or mutual funds, and their analysts will be reviewing the same documents that we have reviewed. Furthermore, they will also come to the site and kick the tires, so to speak. They'll take a tour of the property that's involved so that they're comfortable with the surroundings, they're comfortable with the community, and that they can make a reasoned appraisal of whether or not that particular transaction is for them.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
One question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The major advantage of the TIFs and a lot of other mechanisms similar to that is the tax advantage, because we can issue the debt tax exempt. But there are a lot of proposals on the table to change that or limit that. Where do you see, what impact do you see for TIF if we were to issue one this year, next year, if that came to fruition? Because they're talking about existing and new.
Are you talking about
issues.
proposals in Congress?
Yes. Sorry, it wasn't clear.
Well, it would affect not only TIFs, it would also affect the county's general obligation bonds. It's not limited. So whatever happens to the the city's GOs would be in the same category, but I'm reluctant to say never anymore after the recession. But I can tell you that there are a lot of municipalities across the country that would be very upset if any of those proposals see the light of day. It's one of the last benefits that municipalities have, and by municipalities I mean cities and counties, to get a reasonable interest rate in the market.
And
Again-
states.
Pardon?
And states.
Oh, yeah, and state
I mean,
agencies for
there's
that matter
plenty
as
of-
well, sure.
There's plenty of weight against it, but it's been proposed from both sides of the aisle. That's what really concerns me.
But, you know, I've been in actually, I started working for Baltimore County in 1972, and those proposals have been on the table off and on ever since. It's nothing new. Now, that doesn't mean that at some point someone won't, you know, lead the crusade to enact them, but so far, knock on wood, we've been pretty successful in beating it back.
But I guess the question is, the margin on these slim enough that the potential 2 to 3% increase in the interest rate for non-tax exempt bonds would make or break a deal? Would break a deal that we'd already done, I guess is the question.
Well, I find it hard to believe that they would have the wherewithal to go back and change a tax exemption once it's already been given. I defer to your city solicitor if he can answer that question. But that seems like that would be a constitutional no-no. But again, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not going to propose that I know. But these interest rates, by the way, on TIFs are significantly higher than an interest rate that the city would pay on its general obligation debt. Transactions that we're working on right now have maturities of upwards of 30 years, and we're looking at interest rates in excess of 6%. So, you know, they're not something that's going to be as inexpensive as 2.5 by the city.
We're here, frankly, and we appreciate all the questions. We are definitely here to try to provide information. We're not suggesting we're not here to sell TIFs. It's not our job. Again, we're on your side of the table, helping you think through your options. As we discussed, there are other alternatives, whether it's P3, whether it's, you know, revenue bonds, a variety of different things. And I guess as we move through time, if we want to continue this discussion, I think as we sort of get the list of projects and sort of the timing of them, there may be things that are of a dollar amount or of a type of purpose that lend themselves to just the city doing, like a streetscape. I mean, you're not going to get an opportunity to leverage a developer to do something on your behalf or build something just to, you know, put brick pavers in a street. And I don't mean to belittle it. It's a worthwhile thing to do. But those may be things that the city says, all right, we're going to take that on our own. There may be some other things where we want a developer to take some risk and we want to protect the taxpayers, as Councilwoman Cohen suggested, and that may be ripe for a TIF. And there may be things further still where you've got something the developer really wants in terms of an easement or air rights or something that they're willing to. So once we have a holistic view of what the projects are, it's our job working with you to figure out what the best overall plan is, and it may be 4 or 5 different things that get stitched together that become an overall plan of finance, and that's where I want to leave it.
I appreciate that, and I think we want to have a continued conversation here so that we can one day compare apples to oranges, to pears to pineapples, and, you know, try to understand what our options are and what the implications are. And I really think that you know, I like to know that we have your expertise on board as part of our team on our side of the table to expand our the bandwidth of our knowledge as we go into, future discussions and plans for the future of our city. So I appreciate that. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming down here and joining us. And we'll definitely have you back.
Thank you very
Good.
much.
We look forward to it. Thank you for the
Absolutely.
time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Well, next on our agenda, I'll invite Mr. Mackies and Mr. Strasburg forward, if you wouldn't mind coming up. Next item on our agenda is the expansion of the Henry Parker Sports Complex. Oh, did I skip one? What did I skip?
Coin.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, fake out. Fake out. Forgive me. We'll have you up here in just a moment, gentlemen.
Practice run.
That's right. So the next item on our agenda is actually a request from the Salisbury Coin Club. So my apologies. You want to come join us? Absolutely. And forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Schmeida.
Yes.
Welcome, Mr.
Raymond
Schmeida.
I'm the secretary of the Salisbury Coin Club, and I am here to propose the request for a token using the Salisbury seal as on this coin. And this is the 10th anniversary coin of our club. And the proposal will be the face of the coin, the Waikamago Indian, as we have it, and the reverse of that coin as transposed from the seal, which may not be as pretty as that, but this is probably what we'll go with, unless we pull another one. And with the wording, the Coin Club will be both sides. There'll be no denomination, and the coin will pretty much be almost just as you're looking at the one in the hard plastic upper of our token, as was on the 10th anniversary, with some variation in the size, perhaps minimum from 1.5 inches to 1 1/8 inch, because of financial preference, and we just wanted the okay that we won't be stepping on any toes, and I think it'll further Salisbury promoting the city rather than the Delmarva Peninsula as on the other coin.
What would be the distribution?
We'll be getting
for
100
sale,
coins, no more than 100 coins in a bronze finish of a copper zinc alloy.
Okay.
And they'll be probably about $9 a coin, and we're trying to get a little bit less. They may be done in pewter by the Easton Pewter Company, one of the other gentlemen who is researching. But these coins may be made in China.
Are you fundraising to pay
No,
that
we have
cost,
it
or
in
will you
our
be selling
treasury.
it? Oh, you have it in your
We
treasury?
have it in our treasury. We're a nonprofit, of course, a civic group, and this is our last chance to get a semi-centennial coin, 50th anniversary. And,
Do you mind passing that down to
Yes,
Mrs.
I'm
Mitchell?
sorry. My pleasure. Thank you.
Any questions for
Yes.
Mr. Schmeida? Did I say that right?
Not so much a
Yes, you
question.
did, Shimada.
Not so much a question, but
Mr.
a
Spees.
comment that I see the example of the coin there that you have, and I've been through several places in the city where that very seal is hanging,
Yes.
and it seems as though when they're painted or otherwise embellished, we can't decide what fruits there really are on that thing. In some places where you see peaches there, it's strawberries
Peaches.
or apples.
Yes.
And I'm not sure about the sweet potatoes, and I'm not sure about the whole,
Take care of it, return it.
yeah, what is the official seal? We
Are you
need
saying
to
you
come
want
to
to officially
terms with
redesign the
that,
seal?
yes.
Is that what you're saying, Mr. Spees? You want to
Yeah,
have an official
let's come
redesign?
down to
I
what
think
the
it's a
actual
priority.
elements, what
It's
the
a
elements
priority
are.
nature.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Let's find out what the actual elements are before we.
Chair votes aye.
Yeah.
I would suggest the flag be moved off of the Waikamago face to be, moved over there for aesthetic purposes.
Balance. Feng
Absolutely
shui.
not. And you're downstaging yourselves. You don't want to do that.
Well, so the request is to use the city seal in one form or another, with one variety of fruit or another.
I'd like to embellish it more like that, but I think we'll stay with what we have for simplistic sake.
Well, is there council consensus to allow the Salisbury Coin Club to use the city seal for this project?
Yes.
Yeah,
It sounds as
unless
if there
the
is.
city attorney knows of some nefarious use it could come to, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's really neat that you're doing that for your 50th.
Okay.
I wish we could distribute them to the merchants at cost, but we may recoup some of the costs because it's cutting into our other funds pretty deep. I really have to press for this. And I didn't think I would, but, you know.
Well, you have,
We're going to make it.
Can we pre-order?
Well, I will, there'll be probably $10, $1 above cost, and I'll try to get some up to you all.
great.
Okay.
Well,
I
you
wish
have-
we could do it for free. I don't know about that, but
You have our approval, and if you need, well, we look forward to seeing them out there. So,
thank you.
when you need help advertising or promoting them, I'm sure Ms.
I'll
Kordakowski
look
back
to go
there.
to the merchants, and maybe they'll at least pick one up. Whether they'll display them or not, at least I don't know.
Well, thank you very
I
much.
did see another one of our tokens up in the Baltimore Coin Show last week and before, I think.
Is that right?
Of that issue, you mean?
No, not this one, but a different one. It had writing on the back. I didn't have a lot of time to read it, but I would have liked to pick it up, but I didn't.
Well, you have our support.
But I know the dealer, so I can probably go back.
Great.
But it may be there yet.
Thank you
All right.
very much.
Thank you all so
Thank you for
kindly.
joining us, absolutely.
And thank you for having me.
Take care. Gentlemen.
Now let's play ball.
Yeah, positive. Please,
Only for
come
you.
on forward.
To Tim's point,
Is it different over there than it is there? It is. Yep. Tomatoes, carrots,
Peaches.
or parsnips, something.
Go figure.
Well, good evening.
How are you?
Good, how are you? Welcome.
Well, we have a request, and with that request comes a reward for the city, and that is clean industry, jobs, job preservation, economic activity, and hopefully generation of additional taxes. And what we're talking about is tourism, and very quietly, we've built something very special here in Wycomico County, which the city of Salisbury is a major part of. Through tourism, which is funded through our hotel room tax, which also funds the zoo, we generated 31,000 hotel rooms last year through 30 events. And the economic activity conservatively this year, at the end of this fiscal year, is on track for almost $21 million, up from 17 the year before. And 5 years ago, it was just $11 million. We've caught the notice of the state of Maryland, which they now have invested with us to expand and modernize our facilities so we can keep our progress moving forward, including putting together their sales team through the Maryland Stadium Authority. You recently read that Wycomico County has entered an agreement with Ocean City to establish a organization we're calling MASA, which is the Middle Atlantic Amateur Sports Association, which puts together all of our assets. They have more hotel rooms, and we have the beach and the ocean, and we have all the facilities, and we have our own hotel rooms, but some of the events we've had here have far more exceeded our room capacity here in Salisbury. Most of the businesses, by which I mean hotels, restaurants, attractions, retail, are in the city limits, whereby you benefit quite a bit. That niche that we've built is sports marketing. We use the Civic Center for wrestling and dog shows, but we also leverage the sports complex, Henry Parker Sports Complex, even more than the Civic Center, believe it or not, where probably 65-70% of our book are outdoor events. We're working on an agreement with a sports organizer in Orlando, Florida, shortly called the USSSA, United States Amateur Sports Association. And we had premier girls softball players here just a couple weeks ago. Many of them were former Olympians or NCAA All-Americans. And with that, we had a tournament. Well, this same group organizer wishes to expand from not only girls softball, which we have a World Series here. We had 390 teams in town over 3 weeks. That call alone was over 12,000 hotel rooms. 35% of those were in Ocean City because we, quite frankly, couldn't accommodate the demand. We're on target again for about 400 teams. We'll be in here in a couple of weeks. And this same organizer wants to help us with softball, not only softball for girls, but men's baseball, as well as soccer. One of the things that they're needing us to do is to build a facility that has 8 soccer, lacrosse fields, and 8 or 9 softball fields at one place. Even though with that World Series we used 29 fields, we're still going to be sprawled all over the place. They want a bigger facility to house the hub of the championship final games. And with that comes to mind is Henry Parker Sports Complex. Give you a little history. The park that you know as Naylor Mill was purchased, probably one of the first program open space purchases made in Wicomico County in the very early 70s, and what that was intended to do was to protect a precious natural resource known as the Paleo Channel, and I know you will know all about the value of that, which is almost like gold. Back in the early 80s, we were looking for a sports complex, and the mayor back then and Paul Martin and Henry Parker crafted a deal where the city gave us 40 acres. It was almost anything you wanted to build the sports complex there. And at that time, our vision was not sports marketing and tourism, but just a place to get outside of Harmon Field, and kind of got noisy there at 2 o'clock in the morning. I got the brunt of the complaints, but we needed more fields in one place, so that was the beginning where the city donated 40 acres. You have 120 acres left. What we're asking for is about 35 acres of that, which runs from the street that runs into the sports complex, and it butts up to what we call Naylor Mill Stream, which would be a very clean edge where the stream would then separate what we would like to have as a donation from the balance of the area. As far as getting access to that property for wells or anything, there's no real problem with that. It's all compatible. I was on vacation when this was scheduled, but later last week I gave you a brief. Did you all receive that? As well as an area of photography which kind of delineates what it is that we want. With this, we have secured $1 million from the state, with, depending on elections, of course, if incumbents come back, to get the balance of another $500,000, which we need to match as a county. The county's come up with its match already of $1 million, so we're ready to go with $2 million to do 2/3 of the facility, and then hopefully the other $500,000, half with the county and half of the state, will be forthcoming to finish the project, which we're hoping sometime in the early spring or spring of 2016, we will now have the fields of 8 to support this. So what will happen from that, Will, is we're expecting, in round numbers, another $10 million of economic activity, 12 new tournaments over the next 4 years after that facility is built. And to give you an idea about the, I wish Sam was still here. I believe he was on bond council with the county when we went up, but someone that was actually on the other side of the table evaluating the county had their children. Yeah, I was in Salisbury. I know that's what you want the $1 million for. What a facility, what an event. You're on to something. So we have a reputation for that World Series of 12 states in Canada, where we really feel as though we found our wheelhouse being the middle Atlantic place for amateur youth sports. And again, the city will benefit from jobs and people and economic activity from all of this. as I mentioned, from all the various businesses that, benefit from transportation, real estate, foods, restaurants, attractions, and lodging. So with that, that's the request, and we're hoping that that will be favorably reviewed and considered by the city for that donation.
So a couple of questions. I assume that as part of this process, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's an economic impact analysis or some rough estimate of what the
Yes,
impact of
we've done a feasibility on this as far
The
as building and perform on these events and these tournaments. It's been very conservative, and I'm estimating about $10 million. And you say, well, how do you do that? And in the beginning, I was very conservative, but the Maryland Stadium Authority retained Crossroads consultants out of Florida that also did the economic feasibility for Purdue Stadium and the Civic Center as far as investing in it. And they're all over from Los Angeles to the other side of the ocean doing these things. So they're a very qualified group. They've done exit survey of people who participated in tournaments, sports tournaments in Maryland, and they had almost 500 tournaments, and they were asking people, well, how much did you spend, and how did you spend that money? So I have the benefit of that information now, and I found out very quickly that my estimates were 25% conservative to what the findings were from all their trending analysis. So when I first did this at $7 million, I really felt like pretty easily I can jump that up another 25% based on what I've learned from that study. So it's based on a pro forma on what it is we've done.
Sure.
And then using the trending analysis from this study was employed by the state of Maryland.
Another question I have was the implications for hotels. It seems to me that with growing usage, and this may or may not be part of that study or any other study that you guys have commissioned, but I'd love to know if there's unmet demand, and this may be ancillary, and we can have this conversation another
Well,
time.
it's very
but I'm
easy.
curious.
We're into trending all the time, Mr. Day, and what I have to say to you is that our average daily rates and our occupancy rates are below the average of almost insolvency. This business that we have brought in is actually keeping hotels afloat. And if you want to ask the truth about occupancy, there's plenty of occupancy. And if you brought the Hotel Motel Association in here, they could easily put together a very convincing case that we have need for more business for these hotels to be solvent.
Okay. So there's more of a need for more business than there is currently unmet demand in hotel rooms.
Yes.
We currently have more, what I would call Class A hotel space in the area than can be serviced.
Okay.
So from our standpoint, I think we've got, how many weeks now of room nights have we
For
got?
tourism is 4.5 weeks of full capacity.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to generate enough demand for 12 weeks of room occupancy.
Through tourism.
Through tourism, I would like to see us match the seasonal full occupancy that we see in Ocean City. And I don't think that's a stretch. I think we can do that. I think this works on a number of different levels. First of all, it's a great quality of life asset that we can leverage. Second of all, it's very light footprint industry for us. And third of all, we've demonstrated that we're a 3.5 hour drive time from 25% of the population in the United States. And travel teams that are looking for high quality tournaments, and we've associated ourselves with the United States Specialty Sports Association. That's their business, high quality sports tournaments. We are a perfect fit, and this is to me, this is just a natural next step in our progression. I think we win all the way around.
The expansion of the sports complex, Will we also be looking at an expansion of, or an extension of the seasons for which, during which the games are played? We see a specific
Well, I
set
think the
time.
introduction of soccer fields automatically does that. If we get into what we don't have right now is a high enough inventory of rectangular fields. So if we want to expand soccer, lacrosse tournaments, field hockey tournaments, we need more high-quality rectangular fields.
Right.
And this begins that process.
I see we're at 4 at this point.
And I was interested to see I was curious what the future land use was proposed in the comprehensive plans, and that this is shown today. Current land use is forest, which it obviously is, and shown future land use as park and open space. And I was just curious whether or not it was targeted for something
It's in
else.
concert with the-
Right.
with
Well,
the proposed
which
comp plan.
is important. I mean, I know that level of planning has
Absolutely.
assumed these things or thought about these things for a long time. So nice to know that it's in concert with those proposals.
The question I had was about traffic. You're talking about almost doubling what you have out there during these tournaments. And yet Naylor Mill Road's gonna stay the same size. That same 2-lane, no turn lane. It's what, 2 weeks that this happens, or 3 weeks?
Well, if I can get my highway user revenue back from the state,
Hey,
I could do something
Fight for it
about that.
every conversation I have. Don't, you're preaching to the choir there, but yes.
No, that's certainly consideration. There's no question it's a consideration. But again, those are really the kinds of problems that you want to have. It's like a restaurant having a waiting queue. That's a good problem to have. If we generate the economic activity that we believe we will generate, we'll find the funds to do what needs to be done on that road in order to accommodate the traffic during these peak periods. And it would be peak periods, it wouldn't be constant. But it's a valid concern.
Does the administration have a position on this that they'd like to share, that you'd like to share, or?
Well, no, thank you for the opportunity. I did want to make mention of the fact that I just recently became aware of the fact that we would likely need at least one or perhaps multiple easements in that area because of the paleo well field. So I asked Mr. Molds and Ms. Pollock to be here this evening if they wanted to come forward and just talk about that briefly.
Sure.
Yeah, that was another question, was restroom facilities and concessions and that kind of thing. Do we have sufficient infrastructure there?
That's all,
What
that's
would
all
be
part of
part
the
of the
$3 million we
Part
want
of
to
the
spend.
investment. Mr. Williams?
Yeah, Paleo number 2 wells on that site, and it's a 75 by 45 foot rectangular area that services that. The area is protected with a wellhead protection zone already in terms of limiting what types of uses can be in that area to protect the water supply. Probably the only thing we'd have to check on is right now, because we own the property, there's probably not a requirement for an easement around the wellhead itself. Sometimes they want like a circular area around that wellhead. We looked at some of the regulations, didn't see anything in particular, but we probably want to check with MDE to see if the ownership is transferred, that they may want to have just an easement around that, a little larger than that footprint, just to protect the well itself. But as far as the compatibility of the use, as was mentioned by Gary, for that area, that wouldn't be a problem.
Is this the site that is, maybe a couple hundred meters or maybe 150 meters north along the eastern edge of the property?
It's a little white.
That tiny
White
little.
area.
Little white block there.
Little block.
It's right there. Kind of blew up.
Yeah.
You put an X on that.
Scenic Drive?
Okay. So that I guess we'd need to execute any easements as well as transfer, kind of in rapid succession in order to do this in a timely fashion.
Well, is there an opportunity, I know I'm throwing a monkey wrench in here, for an indefinite lease versus a
I was just-
donation?
I was just thinking the same thing. If
That
actual,
way it's still in our name.
if actual transfer of the property in fee presents issues, and this is for council, would a land lease be construed as a property transfer by state agencies? I mean, really what we need is just the ability to develop the complex, and you can do that either through a transfer of the land or a lease.
My preference
Some
would be
duration.
whichever presented fewer
Whichever
challenges to
presents
getting
fewer
it
challenges.
done.
The political challenge when you get into this over the time, I've seen this construct used several times. Those that are making the improvements want to have the insurance that you have the lease for the life cycle of what the investment is on building the facility. And when you get into that, it gets over years and years and years, 50, whatever years, you finally say, well, let's just do it the other way. The other problem that you run into when you get into these things are grants from the state, that whoever has it, really, who owns it, has the ability to leverage the grants. So it makes it a little more cumbersome if it was leased to the county and then we wanted to leverage grants. But if leasing is the only way that you feel comfortable in doing, that's better than nothing. But we have to think about the terms of that lease to be the life cycle, the expected life cycle of those facilities that we're constructing on that land.
Right, but that might be an easier hurdle than MDE.
Or perpetual
Perhaps.
easement.
I have to say this, we deal with MDE too, because we're tapped in there. That's how we get our water to irrigate. We do get our potable water through your sources. And I would be awfully amazed. I could see, that's a very compatible clean use, what it is that we're putting there. Now, it'd be a little different if we were putting septic systems in there and things of that nature, but this would all be tapped into city water and sewer.
Yeah, just to clarify, the lease, the easement that I'm considering, typically it's just around that wellhead. It could only be like a 200-foot radius. We're not looking at a large area because the wellhead protection ordinance carries that weight as far as those type of uses. But sometimes they want to make sure that there's a certain control around that. And that's something you just have to clarify. So it's not something that would be across the whole property.
It'd be a city easement.
Yeah,
Or
either,
state easement.
you could either do things where we would either have still own the property that the well is on, and whether that rectangle would get a little bigger, or we maintain the rectangle that I mentioned dimension-wise, and then just have an easement a little bit further out, so that we have control over whatever is there.
Yeah, they want you to have direct control over the water supply.
And either transfer the entirety or the bulk minus
Yes.
that little
Yes.
rectangle.
We can figure that out.
Another golden map. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of distance between the field and
And the
existing.
road, right, if you go like 100 feet to the center line of the road from the well.
You can see it when you're driving in, it's fenced in.
I mean,
Can't picture it.
the ball fields are pretty close. Both of them are pretty close to it already, so.
Would Scenic Drive be realigned, or would it stay where it's at?
Stays the same.
Stays where it's at. So what is the next step in the process? I mean, in terms of exploring, if council's amenable to moving forward, do you and Ed work with
I would
Mr. Tillman?
I would probably have our law office get with Mr. Tillman,
You
and
guys can
we could,
communicate, I'm sure.
work through the details of it.
Okay.
Our intent today was just to see if there was if the city was amenable to the concept
Sure.
and the notion of
Well,
doing this.
I think it's a compelling project, and we certainly, with $2 million or $3 million, excuse me, of potential investment, and, a return in the economy, I'm not interested in standing in the way. I think it's a very positive thing. So I would just ask whether or not there's council consensus at this time to allow this to move forward. It'll certainly be coming back to council several times, I'm sure. The agreements and things like that, as well as, whatever the proposal, whether it's a sale or lease is that's worked out between our legal departments, but
I have
Mrs. Cohen has a
Yeah, I
Yes.
have a couple of questions. It is very compelling because one of our selling points here is our outdoors. I've said that for years. This is one of the reasons why we came to the county to talk about the space adjacent to the center for the skate park, because it would be able to leverage the very things that you all named without negatively impacting residents. So one of my questions on this is, speaking of traffic, and you mentioned noise, Mr. Mackes, do we have any potential issues with residential areas nearby? When we talk about traffic, typically a lot of traffic is good for businesses, but depending on what happens with that, and is it the city or the county or a combination of both because of our leapfrogging boundaries? Who's going to be responsible for dealing with those traffic issues? What is the actual value of the land? Would be a question that I have as well from a donation standpoint. So for me, I'm not adverse to the concept. As you say, it's a low impact use that's compatible with what's right next to it. At the same time, there are other things that are developed along that corridor, including some residential projects, both current and proposed. And I would like to have some sense, and maybe our planning and zoning folks could clue us in a little bit as to.
Yeah, let's look at that. Let's have our P and Z folks look at that. Off the top of my head, I think the immediate impact, there's not much residential in that immediate area, but as you go further out Narrow Mill Road, you do get into some residential areas, but I'm not sure of the traffic patterns, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know how much traffic is coming in from 50 in the bypass area to the complex, and how much of it is coming up 13 and coming that way. But we can find out.
I would like to get a better handle on
Sure.
that, because we've got the senior village right
Yes.
there.
Yes.
And when you add traffic, you start cutting back people's ability to be mobile, which is not good for them. So that's a concern I
We'll
have.
ask P and Z to look at that for you.
That particular corridor on Naylor Mill has had accidents over the years, some that have been fatal. I remember that from our Metropolitan Planning Organization, the studies that came forward. So if we're talking about doing something that's going to do a substantial increase there, we need to take a look at what that really means. I do applaud you all for taking a look at, how we leverage those things. I'd also be interested to know, when we're talking about 31,000 hotel rooms and $21 million being up from 17 and 11, how many of those truly are within city limits that we're seeing the revenues for?
In the county, most of the county hotel, I say county hotels, are located within the incorporated district, either Salisbury or Fruitland.
Fruitland's just the Comfort Inn. I mean, not Comfort Inn, the
Hampton
Hampton
Inn.
Inn. That's it.
Hampton Inn.
I think everything else is in
I think
Salisbury.
pretty much everything else is
Well, there's the
inside.
Holiday Inn.
Most of the
Delmar.
restaurants. Mall.
Yeah, the Holiday,
Holiday Inns in Delmar.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But
What-
most of those rooms are within
So
Salisbury.
I would say you're probably 85%, just off the top of my head, are within your,
They can't operate without the public,
Yeah,
public,
what fiscal year are we talking about for that number?
whatever.
the 20 to 21 million this fiscal year ending June 30th.
Okay, so it was the FY14.
The year before it was 17.7.
I have a question about layout.
Mr. Spees?
Mr. Moles, could you take to the lectern again? Thank you. I don't know the name of this little waterway that we're looking at here. Do you know the name of that creek that comes through there?
I can't remember. I know MD had come up and done some surfing. Leonard's Mill Branch.
Okay, fine.
Going
That,
down
that,
Wacomico.
that dumps to the Wacomico River downstream. And I see that we're in a great way kind of in and out of the border of that waterway. And I think that there's a fairly good slope there as well to the water.
Tim, I have
Is this gonna-
topography on all this.
Yeah, yeah,
It's all done.
okay.
So there's no real big problems there with slopes or at all. It does drop off a little bit. Because we had all that to get relief at the original sports complex.
Mhm.
So everything you've seen there, actually Brock Parker has been retained
Okay.
to do a feasibility and all this. So we have a pretty good lay of that land from the Leonard's Mill branch going east.
Tim, you
Understand.
would be concerned about the watershed impact, I take it,
I'm
and how
con-
we'd engineer that.
Well, I'm concerned about the watershed as well as the health of the river.
There are
and-
retention ponds in there
Comes down
that
there.
meet all those criteria.
Yeah, what I guess I wondered was why did you even bother in the, let's see, it's the west edge of these, of this proposal, even take that waterway in with you? Do you see what I mean? This area here?
I mean, if you get clean lines, I have no problem following that whole stream.
Mhm.
I mean, that's fine.
But, and when MDE comes in, I think you're gonna be responsible for a tree buffer of some size at that point, so why even go to the other side of the creek, with the request? And that's it for me. Is this big enough, when you do make those considerations?
Okay.
Is this enough land to cover your requirements?
I'm hoping that we have to come back later and tell you we want to increase it more so we have more economic activity here.
I don't have a
But
problem
at
with
this
that.
point, I'm not going to sit here and be greedy. I'll take this to get started. I mean, but who knows where this is going to go? We're on to something.
We'll look at those refinements.
Yeah, one
We'll
of
do a
the,
traffic study, and we'll come back, and we'll talk about any impact on the watershed,
I mean,
and
one
how
of
that
the,
would be mitigated.
one of the things for us to consider in this whole lease versus donation is, if the city were to move forward with this, would be to be sure that the liability, the maintenance, all of that goes with the county. Because frankly, our 30,000 residents are already doing a lot for the region, and they really can't take on a whole lot more. Their
I agree
plates
with
are more than full.
Just for your information, since the day we built the complex, we had $23,000 in the bank before we turned the lights on and threw out the first pitch. There's been no tax subsidy into that complex since it opened in 1986. And we're talking right now, without this improvement, $250,000 enterprise. So there will be none, but when you're transferring this over and we own it, certainly, because we own it, it's on us.
And
It
I
would be,
have
it would
one
be a
other
county
question.
park, and it would be our responsibility to address that county park as we would any other county park.
Speaking of which, you have bike trails through there. What happens to
They're gonna-
them?
That, I don't even know. I just know people have done that without asking, really. Obviously,
Impromptu
that's gonna be
bike trails.
displaced.
Well, they've, when they came for us, they talked about it like it was, part and parcel of an organized effort and sanctioned and everything
That
else.
will
So
be
I-
an issue.
Okay.
You said it will be displaced?
An issue.
Before that, you said it will, or they will or will not be displaced, the bike trails that are in there now?
Replacing those bike trails, we're going to be taking that space up, putting these fields and facilities on it. There might be something around the perimeter, but what you're going to deal with is what people like to do is just go out and go in the woods and do all those things. You can go on the city park, and you can see how they've deviated off the greenway trails and all behind Pony. I run that. They've crafted areas in there. We can perhaps work on other areas for them, but using joint use the way it is right now, because they're all over the place, that's not going to work.
Gary, what is the intended use of the areas to the north of the existing fields, to the north and to the west of the existing fields that
That's-
are shown as wooded areas now?
There are going to be soccer fields all in there. That whole area is going to be
It's
built
gonna
all
be
the way
extended.
around.
Okay.
And again, I wish what I could have done is brought in a little bit of a design when you even talk about traffic. And I think we've got it down through all of our trending analysis, all the years of park design, that you're going to see the traffic perhaps increase maybe by about 25 or 30%. That's just and why it's more now is because we have lights.
Yeah.
That's how we're building out that parking lot. Right now, that parking lot capacity is 720 cars. So, you know, I can easily say a third or 30%. I'm just talking off the top of my head, but I think I'm pretty close.
Is that city or county land on the other side of the branch? I can't tell from the map.
I'm not really sure. I believe it's all city.
I think it's city.
Part of it, when you go on that oval and all that, is Don Wilbur's sod farm and all that to the north by that round circle track. And then you run back up into the rifle range for the police practice. But everything to I believe to the north and to the west is all part of the 120 acres that you own as part of the Naylor Mill Park.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Moles, did you have anything else?
No, I think, like it was discussed, it's a compatible use with the well. We just, to make sure we don't, keep MDE happy. I think the biggest challenge is going to be the forest conservation. There's going to be a lot of trees coming down.
Sure.
So they may need some places to put some.
But I think they've done a really good job with the existing fields in keeping a fair amount of trees there.
Yeah,
And that benefits us in a number of ways.
especially around like the parking areas and stuff
Keeping the
like that.
temperatures down,
Right.
filtering the water, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
The mitigation's gonna be on us, and out at Winter Place Park, Tom Ruark donated, I forget, it's like 260 acres, it's all wooded, it's all part of a wetland that was undevelopable, and I think we're targeting a lot of mitigation out there.
I might think about, I don't know, depending on what the final size of the area is, consider some mitigation for the traffic, because as we go down into that little valley there, it does get sort of blind. And, really, you can't see what's around the corner.
Driven down there, I know exactly
Yeah,
what you're
and maybe a second egress or ingress, or moving the thing to a little more flat land, I'm not sure, but we have traffic study people that can help you
One
with
of the
that.
things that we have to recognize is that when we're building these things, they're not cheap. It'd be nice, it's such a beautiful site. One of the reasons why we have what we have, most of these ball fields are built on farm fields. I've been there with my daughter, I've been all over the place, and one of the things everybody loves is our signature is the shade, and I designed that park and agonized over every tree that's still standing there, so I understand what it is, but I sit there and say, well, if we don't want to use this site, and we have to start all over somewhere, we're gonna lose a lot of ground, and I would say to replicate the Parker complex right now, you're probably talking at least $5 million, at least, easy, and so we have quite a base there to add on to, that I'm just really hoping that we can put all of our intelligence and intellect together to do what's responsible out there and be able to expand it. And personally, I feel it's doable.
Well, it would be really nice if Phase 2 can have the same sort of shade characteristics
It
as
will, I
Phase
promise
1.
you that.
Yeah, we don't.
It is a beautiful place.
We don't want to change the character of the existing park.
It is a beautiful park. What I'd like to do is to allow the legal department and Public Works and the administration to work with you to develop the agreement, move this forward. And I'm sure we'll see you again soon with traffic plans and agreements of sale or 99-year leases or something. But I think this is a great project.
So
We're
that's
excited to
consensus.
support it. I do want to make sure that we have
We'll
council
circle back.
consensus
Oh,
to move it.
I would like to find out those other things,
Right.
because there may be something that comes up that would
And-
influence
And I'm quite sure
what
we
we might
will.
want to do.
We will see this again, but in order to move it to that next stage of analysis, I think we need to agree to forward this to the administration to bring us to that stage.
We'll bring that
Agreed.
information back to you,
Thank you.
your
Great,
requested
thank you.
information.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, gentlemen. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Moles.
Okay, next item on our agenda is the approval of the revolving loan application for Echelon Restaurant. I'll invite Mr. Matthews to come forward, and Mr. Stevenson, will you be
Sure, I'll
presenting this?
go through the resolution quickly. Before you as a resolution approving a loan to Echelon SBY LLC for from the city's revolving loan fund to assist in the renovation of the building located at 100 North Division Street. The city's revolving loan fund is purpose of aiding and revitalizing downtown areas. Echelon SBY LLC has requested a loan from this fund to finance a renovation of a restaurant, again located at 100 North Division Street. The Bankers Review Committee reviewed the request and determined that it meets the guidelines. A copy of that letter from the review committee was provided in the packet. It's fairly straightforward. If the council is willing to advance this resolution, it would provide a loan in the amount of $24,000 for improvements to the Echelon establishment. Mr. Matthews is here. He can talk about the particulars, and that would conclude staff briefing.
Sure. I don't have much, given that, the Banking Review Committee has approved your application, but I just did have one kind of technical question. There are some pictures included. I don't know if you've seen what was forwarded to us, but there were some pictures included of work that has been done as well, and they were shown as a before and after. And I was just wondering if you could maybe give all of us kind of an indication of where things are at, and where they will go based on the receipt of this loan.
Okay.
And anything else you want to add?
Basically, when I walked in the building, it was a office building. It had 9 offices in it. What I've done so far is we've went in, we've upgraded electrical. We've done demo on all of the pre-existing offices, and we've totally opened up the building. We've taken the back area. It was a bank at one point in time. Taking the back area where they used to have their coffee and everything, and along with one of the offices, and expanding that into a kitchen that wraps around into a dishwasher area, which was, I guess, their little dishwasher area at one point in time. We've taken out all the pre-existing flooring that was carpet. We've built the bar in. We started to purchase some furniture. So basically all the demo is done. 95% of the construction is done. Where we're at right now using the revolving loan money is, one, to upgrade the plumbing. The plumbing is the most expensive part of this project because the building has never been a restaurant. So bringing in the proper plumbing to sustain what a restaurant does is a little different than 3 or 4 people going to the bathroom on a daily basis and flushing, the toilet. So that's the most expensive part. Being in compliance with what the health department needs and what we need as a restaurant. So that's where a lion's share of the revolving loan money is going to go. Other parts of it is going to go to the flooring. Because it's an old building, there's been many levels of flooring put in there where it was wood at one point in time and cement backer board, and then we put carpet on top of that, and then we threw hardwood in some other places. So one of the challenges we ran into is when we start pulling stuff up, we start seeing all the problems that people covered up. So now the challenge is how do we fix that flooring? And it's starting to become a expensive challenge to actually fix that flooring. Whether we go in a direction where we bring in concrete and we do the whole floor with concrete, so we can do a polished concrete floor, or we tear up all the cement backer board and go back to the original hardwood, or we try to do carpet. And it's just a bunch of challenges with the floor right now, but just getting over some of those things that the building was beautiful when I walked into it, but we took the makeup off and it wasn't as beautiful once we took the makeup off. So came into I filtered it a little bit. I didn't want to go too far out there. But now that we're seeing those challenges, that's kind of what we're using revolving loan money for. Okay. What I wanted to do is go as far as I could go with my own money before I started to seek out other sources of money. Because one of the main things I'm looking for is limited debt going into the business. So instead of going and finding a $100,000 loan somewhere and saying I'm going to spend all this money on I spent my personal money. So when I go into it, I have limited amount of debt, and debt that's payable back even quicker than what the allowance of the loan allows. So that's kind of why we're using the revolving loan at this particular time.
Sure. Okay. Well, you know, I have to admit, I think this is my first revolving loan recommendation from the Bankers Review Committee, so this is the first time I've dealt with this, but there's a tremendous amount of information provided to council about your project. But
You
it's,
may not
it's
see
great
that
to
much
see.
next time.
Okay, I mean, it's great to, I mean, it's really interesting to see what goes into something like this, but, so thank you to the administration and to Mr. Matthews for sharing all of that. But, I mean, so many of my questions are answered because I can see it.
Well, Terrence did a great job of, you know, and the Salisbury Business School did a great job of focusing like some of those questions that the application asked into redoing the business plan and really answering everything on paper as well as being able to be before you to answer any other question.
Are there other questions from council?
No, but you have my, having dug up a little construction project myself, as they say, once you get started, you never know what you're gonna find. You have my sympathies there.
I walked into it saying, man, $25,000 will knock this out, we'll be open in no time. Yeah, $40,000 later, I'm like, I probably need $25,000 to, you know, so.
And this is the Wilmington Trust building, right, or
It was
space?
a Wilmington Trust, it was a jewelry store, it's been a couple of things. And one of the major challenges we run into is everybody kept adding, nobody was subtracting. So all the old electrical is still there, all the old plumbing is still there. So going in and actually ripping a lot of that stuff out so the new plumbing and the new electrical can go in. Actually, by me putting my restaurant in there, we probably bring this building to today's standards more than it's probably been in several years because we're cleaning out all the old junk and putting in new stuff that is up to code.
Okay.
Golly gee, I wish you'd find at least a diamond or two in those flooring layers or
I've
something.
been looking, I haven't found anything yet. I haven't found $1 or a quarter or anything. And I'm like, the bank did a very good job taking everything when they left, that's for sure.
Deliveries, you don't see any problems with traffic for the deliveries?
No, because the system that I see that works best downtown is keeping deliveries inside of small radius and using either a bike messenger like my Bella uses or using a foot delivery person. Like when we do this building and we do the courthouse, it's nothing to walk across the street with that delivery as opposed to starting a car up and driving a block and putting a quarter in a meter and then, you know what I mean? So I think at first, I would really like to focus my energy on the few blocks that are surrounding me where we can get in and out and get stuff done better.
The deliveries I was referring to were
Oh,
deliveries to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I thought that's what you meant.
well, I think everybody downtown faces that problem, but I think I am the most blessed.
Yeah,
Because
right.
I'm on the street.
Right on the
So,
wide street
you know,
there, exactly.
And so I watch like Brody Joe's and all their deliveries. They kind of got to park down there and then roll it all the way down the plaza.
It's a pain.
So I think I'm in a really good place. He'll probably take up a couple parking spots for a few minutes, but we'll be able to get it offloaded in the building. And I think we're probably in the best situation as far as getting deliveries in and stuff like that.
And trash and garbage.
We got to figure that out because we have limited alley space
Yes.
back there. So 9 times out of 10, we'll be increasing the size of the dumpster back there, and we'll probably work with the other 2 existing restaurants that have a dumpster back there, with the coffee shop and Compod. We'll just probably increase the size of that dumpster and do it like that.
Down the road, we talk about wet garbage and the fragrances that emanate from the containers very often when the sun hits them for a while. I would like to see there, once you get situated and others maybe, come into the city with food service entities, getting together to see what you can do to consolidate some of your wet garbage and turn that into a recycling effort so that we could use it for composting as opposed to going directly to the landfill. So just keep that in mind. I'll come back to you with that later on at some point.
And there are some companies that recycle certain items that restaurants use, and it's a matter of where do we put it.
Yep.
Where do we put that recycling bin?
The plastic, the
And-
cardboard,
Right.
the glass, etc.
I would love what we have the most of and what we will have the most of Everything comes in cardboard.
Yep.
So, and plastic. So to have a couple of recycling bins back there, I think if we can find a space, and I know that church kind of controls that space back there. If we can find a space, I think everybody wouldn't mind having a couple of recycling bins back there where they could get rid of the cardboard and stuff like that. And frequency will overcome fragrance. So
Good.
we gotta get those, we gotta get trash out, not have it picked up every 2 weeks. We gotta get it out there on a more consistent basis, so.
There's a life lesson there.
Yeah, I think as we see more commercial effort being paid down in that area, that we need to come up with some more, I don't know, out-of-the-box ideas for getting rid of that trash.
Well, particularly if there's going to continue to be an emphasis on residential, because we've already had collisions, noise, all sorts of things. Where does the trash go for the residential?
Well, I'll tell you what, and what DC went to a couple of years ago in their code was they require, in all new buildings in districts where it's essentially zero lot line, is garbage has to be built in. And that doesn't mean it has to be chutes, but it's got to be literally built into the facade. There's no alley space dedicated, so, or it's not guaranteed in any way. So it's got to be within the building envelope so that, when you've got the trash truck coming down the route, they can hop out and either open a door or raise a garage type door and pull it out. And that's the way nothing sits on the street. It's all consumed within the building, or all contained within the building. And the receptacle, whatever size it is pulled out and
I would
then
like
put
to
back
figure
in and
that out.
closed. In historic buildings, that's a little more difficult to achieve.
Well, it's hard because I have no back, I have no
Right.
side.
But
Is there a basement in this building?
There is a basement, and it'd be great to have like a compactor down in the basement. If we could figure out how to get it
Still
back
gotta
out.
get it out.
Is
Basement. You know what I mean?
Is this one of the places that was blessed with a delivery elevator or not?
No,
No. Okay.
I am the delivery elevator.
But if your idea of a cooperative dumpster with the other facilities, the other restaurants, that will necessitate more frequent dumping. So, keeping in mind the hours that they can do it because of the noise is another one of those
Yeah,
issues. But
most of your trash guys are 7 o'clock in the morning. They're in there getting it, but they're only there 30 seconds, and then they're out. Just enough time to throw that in, and they roll out. So they may wake you up, but I think when you move downtown, you're part of a culture where there's hustle, there's bustle. At 8 o'clock, life begins. You know what I mean?
You're used to.
At 8 p.m., life begins again. So you kind of know what downtown brings to you.
Sure. Well, is there anything else for Mr. Matthews?
no,
I'm looking forward to macaroni and cheese made with
No,
exotic
wait.
cheeses. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna be knocking it out. Try the lobster mac. That's gonna be good.
All right.
Okay.
So, is there a council consensus to move this forward to a legislative session?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you again soon.
Yes, sir.
Take care.
Should be the 28th.
28th?
Oh, we were going to move it quickly. Yes, that's right, the 14th.
The 14th?
We'll
Yes,
see you on the 14th.
yep,
Okay.
forgive me.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Laura.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is the Ben's Red Swings Enhancement Project. I'll ask Mr. Molds and Mr. Drew to come join us. And anyone else you want with you.
no
Welcome.
With the recent anniversary celebration with Ben's Red Swings, the Lakes expressed an interest to start a new fundraising drive for, I think, mulching type around the playground, but most importantly, providing permanent restrooms for Ben's Red Swings. So DPW have been approached about this likelihood and different locations that would be considered. There were 3 initially. There was one inside the Ben's Red Swings, one where the existing portable toilets are, and a third one over back by where the entrance to the zoo was. Each of them had different constraints. The one significant one is the 100-year floodplain that is right there. as well as the access to existing water and sewer connections for the restroom. So what we did is we went out and we did some survey for them to locate these facilities and put a demarcation where this 100-year floodplain is. And as a result of that, we looked at the different locations, and we came to agreement that the preferable site, both for the Laytons and Public Works, was the location that's shown on the little exhibit that I think you were provided with, the map, which is inside of the park. So we provided like a little site plan for that, and what Matt's done is, in helping the Laytons with the design, she worked on the layout and a representation of what the restroom would look like. It's got separate boys and girls facilities, so it's not a unisex. We like the idea that it's located so that you have the visual view from the playground to where the child would be using the restroom. It also includes a maintenance room in the back that could be used for storage of toilet paper, those kind of things, as well as the piping would go through the wall, so there's less chance of vandalism on that. You can see the stairway and the ramp that come. The ramp provides obviously the ADA access. The stairway in the back is because of the 100-year floodplain, it's raised up. The water and sewer connections would be up towards the road, South Park Drive, where the old restroom sits, that's up on the corner there, and we would be able to tie into the water that's located where it crosses over the access drive going back to the animal health building, because there's a line that serves the misting station.
You lost me
Okay.
just before that. I was thinking it was sort of next to the sprinkler building, the misting building, in that open area there.
Now, right up where the road is, there's a small brick building. As you're going down that little access road in the animal health, on your right, kind of perched on the hill, is an old restroom there. And there's a sewer connection right there, and where the water service comes in.
And that's where it's proposed to go?
Yeah, now what it'll need, because of it's sitting a little higher up, a small lift, like a duplex residential pump station that would pump up into it because of the elevation difference. But it would be a short distance across there and then be able to tie right into the sewer line on South Park.
Okay, so it's, help me out here, I'm directionally challenged. Okay.
And that used to be about, but it's been taken out of service or something. So
This is the inside the fenced area.
that's right.
Mike, would there be changing tables?
And the opening doors.
Yes, I think that was one of the things, those fold down,
Lots of them.
yeah, what do they call them?
The only way you'll be able to get to the bathroom is
Yeah,
from
it's a
within
little
the
Australian.
inside of the fence boundary.
Koala.
Koala bear.
So when the
Koala
park
bear
is closed,
extensions.
the bathroom.
Well, you could tie that in with your,
There you go, next exhibit.
They don't really close the gates, though. They don't close the gates to that park in the evening. So, to the Ben's Red Swings. So that, this is not inside the zoo area, this is inside Ben's
This is
Swings
inside,
there.
right.
So the, Ben's Red Swings, so they'll still be able to get in.
Right, but they'll be locked up.
Would you do like a time block on
No,
the
we would have
doors?
to make arrangements. I think we talked about with the closure of the zoo, work something out with the folks that are closing the zoo, come out and close up the restrooms.
Nah, that's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, what good is that? Everybody gets off work, takes their kids to.
It'll be, yeah, whether it's something, well, we have security at the zoo too.
Yeah, from what we understand, the security guard that comes on at night comes on around 8:30 or so in the evening. And his current schedule, his routine is that he locks the gates to Ben's Red Swings when he comes on, and then opens them in the morning, maybe 6 or so in the morning. So this facility would be open and closed at the same time that the gates to Ben's Red Swings
So
would be
about the 8:30 PM closed,
Yeah.
6 AM.
approximately.
That makes me a little more comfortable that someone is locking them, checking them and locking them, that somebody's not gonna get locked in or intentionally or otherwise. To be staying in there.
Exactly.
So, That's kind of the idea of the thing, and Matt can address any of the architectural issues. But I think what they're looking for is some interest in terms of council to acknowledge that this would be a donation, a future donation to the city, and the city would then be assuming maintenance of the restrooms. Obviously, we're currently paying for the porta potties that are there now, but so.
I think this would be an improvement.
Oh, absolutely.
For the families.
Absolutely.
In fact, I was there over the weekend, and I was going to ask that question of Tom on Monday, and I saw this on the agenda, so that was good. The two things that, and I just heard one of them, that we found in the zoo restrooms that we've recently added are requirements or a strong need for changing tables in both restrooms, not just the female. The other thing is automatic doors, because a lot of people who are in wheelchairs, so they have trouble with those doors. They're pretty heavy. And the handicap, like push button kind of, we just added that in the zoo, and it's been very, very helpful to a lot of people.
I know there was a lot of interest with the Laytons in terms of automatic, the electrically actuated faucets, hand dryers, the minimum is the use of paper towels, trying to use some lighting, natural lighting where possible to keep electrical costs down. So they have a lot of that interest in doing that.
Solar roof.
Yeah, solar tubes.
So if I could just expand on what Mike's introduction. With the 10th anniversary, the Laytons have undertaken a $100,000 goal of having a capital drive. And there are two major improvements that they want to see done for the property. The first is putting a resilient playground surface under the swings and under the bases of the slides where there's a tremendous amount of traffic. We do a maintenance day there about on a 6-month basis. Usually there's one in the fall and one in the spring. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, those are the areas that every single time they get rutted out because there's just so much foot traffic in those areas. So the resilient surface in those areas is one of the goals, and then as Mike said, this is the second goal. The intent of this from a project management standpoint is to really duplicate the successful effort that was done 10 years ago when this playground was built. So that means that it would be through private donations that all the capital improvements would be built. The zoo, I always get these, not zoo commission,
Delmarva Zoological
Zoological,
Society.
yes.
DZS.
Yeah, DZS.
DZS. So 10 years ago, that body acted as the keeper of funds in a way where the Laytons acted as the owners of the project when the project was built. But donations were made to DZS, and then as funds were allocated, spent, the Laytons made sure that they were spent appropriately, and then the checks were issued from DZS. So that same funding mechanism, we've talked to Ron Alessi about this, and he's very comfortable with duplicating that again for this project. So the overall intention would be that the design would be built and be developed based on the amount of funds that we actually receive. We want to only proceed once we have all the funds in hand. And then once we have funds in hand, we know specifically how much money we have to spend. We're then going to develop a design that meets that budget, and we're going to work very closely with Mike and his staff to make sure that we do this and build this facility in a way that's going to be acceptable to them, because the ultimate goal is that once it's built and commissioned and a certificate of occupancy is issued for the building would then be donated to the city, and then it would be really incumbent on the public works folks to accept that and maintain it.
Matt, a couple questions. Do you have a budget estimate for what's shown today?
Yeah, about $50,000
Okay.
is the budget for what we have shown today.
And do you have an estimated timeline for the fundraising effort I say an estimated timeline. Do you have a targeted timeline?
I think the Laytons would like to see the majority of funds received by this fall, but there's no specific deadline date for the fundraising campaign.
Okay. And then in terms of the architecture, I was going to make a comment earlier that I liked the design of the facility, but I did just want to ask, is there a material palette or something that's in concert with some of the structures in the zoo that we can, ensure that there's some parity at least?
If we had to look at
Some
anything, I'd want to
linkage.
look to what's right in the playground proper itself. So
Okay.
the standing seam, red roof,
Right.
I mean, those are kind of iconic for that area, and that's what
I
we
noticed
try
the
to pick up.
stone.
Yeah.
Is there any stone
We
anywhere
have
else?
we have some interesting, it's not really stone, but we have some hand routed work that looks like brick that was really done by the people 10 years ago in the Trex siding that in the Twin Peaks as you walk through the main entrance into the
Yeah.
play. I mean, that's an element that's there now.
Okay. Is that something that you'd try to incorporate?
Try to mimic that somewhat.
Mimic
yeah.
something like that? Okay.
Regarding the architecture as well, what drainage, roof drainage do you have in mind for it? You can have gutters and whatnot.
I'd probably recommend that we not do gutters because of the fouling with the pine needles and things like that in that area.
Okay.
Wash out.
We are going to have a landscape garden area, so we could do something of a rain garden
That's
and
just-
try to
just what I
direct
had
some
in
of the
mind,
flow
yeah.
into that area, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Have you talked with DZS themselves, anybody on the board, about duplicating the process that you used before?
Spoken with Ron Alessi. Mhm.
Because he's really Zoo Commission, not DZS, so that's two
And that's
different.
where I might have misspoke when I said DZS. It's Ron and the Zoo Commission.
Zoo Commission,
that
okay.
were the shepherds of the funds 10
Okay.
years ago. So we're just duplicating the same thing that was done
Okay.
at that time. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's what I wanted to clarify, which one we were talking about, or,
Yep.
Okay, so it's really the zoo commission that we're working with, you'd be working with.
Yep.
Great. Any other questions? All right, so at this point in time, you're seeking council to authorize, continue moving forward.
And at some point, we'd like to see some type of a memorandum of understanding.
Okay.
So that once the facilities are built, they would then be dedicated and accepted by the
Sure,
city.
and that would require council action. Well, then I would definitely, I think at this stage, it's definitely appropriate to seek council consensus to allow this project to move forward so that we can enable you to work with the administration to develop that MOU, and then the next step, which will be the donation itself. That may be some time away, but.
Right.
Is there council consensus to allow this project to move forward?
I have
yeah.
one more
I have
question.
one more.
More questions? All right.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
The thing that's sticking in my head right now is that we put money in the budget this year for maintenance of Ben's Red Swings. As my understanding that it was initially supposed to be self-sustaining, and there was a fund at the Community Foundation, and that it came back to us this year that they needed additional funds. Maybe it was upgrades to equipment or repairing or something. I'm not sure what that is. So was the park in the same vein where it was turned over to the city and we're supposed to be maintaining, or was this supposed to be out of their fund? Number one, I guess, and the other half of that just occurred to me is there are a lot of tax advantages right now, the Endow Maryland that was passed and a couple other things that maybe utilizing the Community Foundation would be more advantageous in terms of raising money than the Zoo Commission being the holder through that endowment fund.
It's worth looking into.
Yeah, so the initial build of the playground 10 years ago, the project was very successful, and we raised more money than we needed at that time. And so there was an endowment established through the Community Foundation that continues to have funds available. When we've done the 6-month maintenance that I talked about, every time there's mulch needed, there's sand needed, and to my knowledge, that's always been purchased by the foundation's funds through the Community Foundation. That said, I would love to see the city, if the city is willing to incorporate into the budget and provide some of that, that would be fantastic, so.
I have to look,
look
verify
into
that,
that,
but I think we
yeah.
put $20,000 in there this year.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Sticks in my head.
I don't remember that, but.
I don't remember that either, but
Okay,
that's
I'll
not to
look.
say that it's not there.
Might have been a dream.
My question has to do with lighting. What exterior lighting do you plan on for night? Because I think this building should be a zero shadow building, just for safety and security.
I could see, definitely under the walkway approach, we'll probably need to have some lighting, so that you can see to get into the doors and illuminate the ramp. I wouldn't illuminate anything beyond that.
Yeah,
And there is some ambient lighting in the area because there's some, lighting for the parking lot. Streetlights.
Right, but what I'm saying is that I feel that it should be, because of the location and the foot traffic that comes through there during the night, and the things that we find on the ground after the night is passed, that this should be a zero shadow lighting scheme. So I mean, some sort of lighting all the way around the building that illuminates every corner of the outside of the building at night.
Okay.
Well,
So,
it
you see what I'm
creates
saying?
a safety issue as well as the vandalism and unsavory types of things going on, just so that somebody can't be pulled into the shadow of the building and have anything happen.
Yeah, I think the question would be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It sort of reminds me of what really well-done rest area buildings do in terms of their night lighting to make sure that there's no, black area around them.
Yeah, I
The
think
ones that aren't good, you don't want to stop there, so.
the question would be not creating I mean, it would require some new lighting, but not creating new lighting for the area, but but that the building doesn't create new dark areas.
Right.
Yes,
Shadow.
thank you.
New shadow in that.
So the
Okay.
building would be
I
inherent
understand.
with the building to create the new lighting scheme.
Okay.
Yeah.
As opposed to just depending on the overhead lights, which will cast shadows at some aspect of the building. I'm not sure where the light poles are, but they will.
If some kind of lighting were needed, since that involves an expense or
You know,
your lighting bill or whatever, motion sensors are a wonderful thing,
Absolutely.
so,
LED strips or
I mean, there's
something
all
of the
sorts
sort.
of, that's one area that has moved forward pretty well over the years.
And I see the chief sitting in the corner over there, who I think would probably agree that lighting is a good thing.
Just say yes.
Maybe cameras, we talked about the cameras throughout.
General, good one.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
You'll see, even though this is kind of outside of the purview of the city park committee, one of the things that they have been asking for years and years and years is restroom facilities in the park. We've all discussed sort of the handicaps that we face with that, whether it's safety or just cleanliness and the amount of upkeep and things like that. So, I mean, that really needs to be thought through as well, is the maintenance of the building and keeping it supplied and, have all those things work out well. But I think it'll be a great test case for trying to find some way to enhance the facilities elsewhere in the park without creating any kind of a detrimental burden on the park.
Well, then, is there council consensus to move the Ben's Red Swings Enhancement Project forward so that a MOU can be developed?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
thank the Laytons for us.
Yes.
Very much so.
Thanks, Matt. Okay. All right, so I'll invite Paul and Amanda to come forward. Next item on our agenda is the Riverside Drive and South Boulevard bike lanes. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Good, how are you? Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Okay. We have two items for legislative consideration regarding the Riverside Drive and South Boulevard bike lanes. First, we have an ordinance to actually create the bike lanes. We did some searching and Kim searched old ordinances, and we have never formally created the bike lanes even on Riverside Drive. So this project, we're talking about dedicated bike lanes on Riverside Drive from College Avenue down to Mill Street. And then on South Boulevard, it's shared bike lanes from Camden Avenue to Riverside Drive. So the ordinance would create those lanes. And then we also have for you a resolution to accept grant money from MDOT to do the improvements to those areas. And on Riverside Drive, we would be restriping the bike lanes. In some locations, they would be a little bit wider, putting in all new signage and markings that are to current standards. And then on South Boulevard, the Shero symbols and signage. And then the grant, which is for $32,440, also includes 5 bike racks. And those bike racks would be placed in the downtown area in public locations. I want to mention that we did take this project and the plans to the Traffic and Safety Advisory Committee to get their input on this. And we did that after MDOT has reviewed the plans. We have review and feedback from MDOT, and it's been accepted now. So now we're to the point of talking about the grant agreement. The Traffic and Safety Advisory Committee, their main comment for us was parking in dedicated bike lanes. So just because we have a dedicated bike lane does not eliminate parking. You still legally can park in that bike lane. So the question was, do we want to have no parking in those bike lanes? That's not in any of the legislation that's before you. We thought that it would be a good topic to discuss at the work session while we were looking at these other items. There are sections of Riverside Drive that have no parking. I think the area of concern is on the College Avenue end, in the residential area. There are occasionally some people parking in front of their homes where it is in a bike lane.
I assumed it was entirely illegal on Riverside Drive.
We even confirmed with
Wow.
MDOT that just because there is a
Never seen
dedicated bike lane, that by default does not mean that it's no parking. So,
I'll just go ahead and state, I would absolutely be in favor of not allowing parking in those bike lanes.
but we'll take any questions. Paul Mauser here is the project engineer. He designed the entire project. This project was all done in-house, the design, the CAD, and we've gone back and forth with the reviews from MDOT. So we will also project manage it, so we'll contract out the work. And part of the grant is that we do have in-kind services, so we will do some of the labor as we did on the first project as well. So we're here to answer any questions.
So a question on the dedicated bike lanes.
Sure.
What will the dimension of the bike lane be?
Okay. The existing bike lanes are 5 feet wide on Riverside Drive right now. So from College Avenue all the way to Wycomico Street, they'll now be 6.5 feet wide. So that'll be a really nice, wide, and comfortable bike lane, which will encourage more cycling. And then from Wycomico Street to Rise Up Coffee, they'll remain the existing 5 feet due to lane restrictions.
Okay.
And then on South Boulevard, they're just shared lanes.
So it won't, then it won't affect, there won't be any restriping from Wycomico Street to Rise Up Coffee?
There will, the stripe will remain where it is right now, but it will be restriped to make it bolder.
Yes, it'll be.
Yeah.
I guess there's some relatively new striping for the crosswalk in there?
Yes.
Will that have to be restriped?
It will not. We took that into consideration, and that's where the 5-foot lane is, right in front of St. Francis at Wycomico Street. Yes, so we took that into consideration when that was done.
Okay.
So that will remain.
What other, I guess you mentioned some other enhancements, not signage, but signals, markings, things like that. Does that include the bike icon that
It
goes
does,
on the
yes.
street?
You'll see the
Okay.
bike symbol and the dedicated lanes. I believe we talked about having the directional arrows also, because that was a comment we got from the first phase.
Yes, very good.
We also talked about, and we talked about this with the Traffic and Safety Committee, on the Camden dedicated lanes, there's the green symbols,
Yes.
sort of at the start in both direction, and trying to do that again here. They aren't that much more expensive. They're more expensive, but that's a nice way to demarcate the beginning
Sure.
of the lane in each direction. So I think we're going to do that again. And then on South Boulevard, it's the Shero symbols and then signs, a lot of signage on both roads.
I'll tell you, when I was in California last year, I was sending back pictures like crazy. You guys probably sent you 20 pictures. Look at these bike lanes. I know I tweeted some out. because the entire lane, when they're dedicated, the entire lane is a different color. It stands out, it's all green. It's all, the crosswalks are a different color. I mean, it gets your attention, so you're not, and they even had some that were parking and then the lane, the bike lane, and then the traffic lanes for vehicles. And even people opening their doors from the parked cars, you're aware, you're opening your door, it's green, it's very, very visible. I don't know what kind of expenses involved in doing that, that's
That's
the
gonna get
kicker.
expensive.
Yeah. But wide swaths, it doesn't have to be the whole thing, but as you were talking
Right.
about those symbols, and putting those, every so many feet, a couple hundred feet or whatever, however. So that
It's
one,
eye-catching,
so that they can be
yes.
seen from one to the next.
Right.
You don't have a long stretch of space where there's this lane and you think, okay, maybe it's ended, maybe not. You see that it's a continuation. The other question is, has the bike committee that we just created weighed in on this, or are they still forming?
No, they're still forming.
Okay.
Yes. So at this point, the Traffic and Safety Advisory Committee is the committee that would look at this, so that we don't have the bike committee formed yet. I think people are submitting their applications to be on the committee.
Well, I think, and I think with regard to coloration, I mean, the thing you'll see in certain places, like Asheville, is where they actually, I don't know what it's called, but where they press down the surface and
The
it.
thermoplastic?
Thermoplastic,
Yes.
there you
Yeah.
go.
Yes.
And then in other cases, you'll see paint, but the one that seems the most sustainable or lasting is when you're actually going to do a project where you're milling and repaving, and then they do a mix with a dye, and then they,
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
you use the same asphalt that you tore up.
But it's
rather than-
colored,
But
yeah.
it's colored, rather than having to paint it, which just is a ton of work to have to maintain.
Right.
If you're gonna talk coloration.
The
But
green,
Too bad we didn't do
if I
that.
might add to that, we've talked about this before, Mr. Moulds, about this might be an opportunity to use some of that colored glass in mixing with the new materials
It's
or
like-
the reused materials to give it make it a blue lane, make it a orange lane. Well, you can't find orange ones, but blue is a very up-and-coming color with glass these days. And I know we have no shortage of it at the landfill.
just to be clear, we're not repaving it.
I understand.
This is just a striping project. but-
And the green symbols that we have on Camden are thermoplastic, so we would be looking to probably use that same product.
And, I mean, I'm getting beyond the scope of this project, but I guess we are in a lot of these conversations. But one of the things I guess it might be worth looking at is I realize this is designed to the AASHTO bike lane standards. Perhaps we need to look at adopting the NACTO standards at some point of the urban bike guidelines and urban street guidelines at some point, at least for the core of the city. But I think this is going to 6.5-foot lanes, which was more than I thought you were going to say, is great. Is a big step forward in what is already a pretty comfortable, bikeable street. But it's also, you have to accommodate or deal with really fast traffic.
Exactly.
So dealing with
Blind spots.
narrower lanes and wider bike lanes, I think would really feel really good and improve perceived safety, at least, for the bikers and runners.
Absolutely.
People run in those lanes.
And the expansion of the bike lanes itself narrows the travel lanes, which of course encourages a lower speed.
Sure.
So that'll be a positive
Absolutely.
externality.
Definitely a positive extra.
While we don't see much parking on Riverside Drive at this point, it may come to us that with increased use of the bike lanes, that we might go to a permit-only
Yeah,
situation.
Where is the area where it is currently prohibited? Do you know?
Yeah, it's down,
Not much.
but yeah, there's not much, it's down past St. Actually maybe on this side of St. Francis, there's like the couple of apartments, that area, I believe.
Wycomico to Winder.
Okay, there you go.
That's
You
the
have it.
only
Okay, I think
prohibited
that's the only prohibited.
on-street parking.
Yes.
Interesting. Well, good to know.
I wouldn't want to park there the way people drive.
I wouldn't want to park there either. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, so we'll see this on our agenda. We'll see both of these items on our agenda on the 28th.
28, yes.
Okay. Well, great work. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mauser. Okay, next item on our agenda is MOU for acquisition of surplus federal property. Chief Duncan. How are you?
Still short.
Who knows, it might change between now and the next
It
item.
might. I keep hoping.
Would you stand up for us?
Trying. Thank you, sir.
Oh, my goodness.
Good evening, and thank you for entertaining this document for us. It's actually a two-step request here. We are requesting once again to enter into the MOU to participate in the DRMO program, the 1033 program, as we've done in the past. And it has produced successful results for us in the past. We, most recently, we acquired a set of shotguns to bring into our agency for use for training and for deployment out on the street, and that saved us some financial wherewithal. So we are once again asking to be allowed to enter into this MOU. The second part of this request is to have a more robust participation in the program by allowing the mayor the authority to allow us to identify pieces of property and then acquire them, and then, of course, come back before you for the proper acquisition procedure. Our problem is always a timing issue relative to acquisition of the property. It takes several readings, as is our charter here in the city of Salisbury, to acquire such property. And typically, those items that are in really good condition and highly usable by the city are typically used, taken up by other agencies that can move faster than we can. So.
My reading of this, I don't see an end date to that. And I'm wondering why we keep coming back to renew it if it's just, I mean, why can't we just give that blanket
Well,
opening to do that?
the program,
I like the idea of the mayor being able to do it, but do
Sure.
we have to make it close end?
the program itself requires an annual MOU.
Okay.
So according to the guidelines of this body, I would have to come back annually to request permission to enter into that MOU.
Unless we give the mayor the authority to continue to sign that MOU.
Well, typically, the department head is the signer for the MOU because that's the custodian, that's the individual responsible for the custody and tracking of the property. But if you'd like it to
Or you,
to be revised.
whomever, whether it's you or the mayor, whatever is required by the program.
Sure. Understood.
Just that you shouldn't have to waste the time and energy to come back here every year to do the same thing. That's what I'm looking at.
I'm not aware of anything that necessarily holds us to going through that exercise. I think more than anything, what we were trying to do was satisfy that requirement and then, of course, get this authorization for the mayor to be able to allow for the acquisition of the quick response to available property. So if the council can and is willing to extend that period, the administration would be agreeable to that, certainly.
Well, regarding the, I mean, taking these kind of one step at a time, regarding participation in the program this year, is there, are there particular identified assets at this stage that you are that you're looking for, or will that really not be determined until items or pieces of equipment become available throughout the year?
Well, right now, actually, we're looking for a personnel carrier, not as robust as the Sheriff's Department vehicle. We're also looking at SUVs, and then something with a four-wheel capacity or an ATV-like thing for our patrols at the range, and then certainly the sand pits where we've traditionally had a lot of problems with people setting bonfires and going back there and riding motorcycles and things like that. So we've actually had to tow some of our vehicles out of there in an attempt to get back there to patrol. So there are some specific access that we're looking at right now, yes.
Okay.
And I think what prompted this discussion or consideration was the fact that you lost out on the opportunity to acquire a couple of Humvees several months ago. Do I remember that correctly? Because of
Right.
the process?
Right.
Well, if we were part of this before, why did we miss an opportunity for Humvees?
Because that in the council first.
Because we would have to come to council and get the authority to acquire the property, and by the time we go through the 2 sessions, the property has already been inspected and then acquired by another municipality. And we can't put a hold on it until council rules, because things come in and out constantly.
Sure.
Should it be mayor or designee? Because what if the mayor's not available and you run into a situation, mayor or city administrator or something like that?
Sure, that would be fine.
Yeah, is there a way we can streamline that, I mean, just for this particular process?
Sure. I think the objective here is to be nimble. If other municipalities are able to be more nimble than we are, you know, we want to be competitive when it comes to getting the equipment that you need at
Well,
hopefully
and
what's it discounted.
If the de rigueur processes for the department head, in this case the police chief, to do it, I don't have a problem with that either. I think, you know, the only thing that I would put forward is there is a concern, and, you know, I trust very much the police chief's judgment on this. And by the way, thank you for the fine job your officers did with the hostage situation over on Smith Street, and for your continued support and cooperation with the robberies in the area, your liaisons with other law enforcement agencies and prosecution. I mean, all those efforts are really deeply appreciated.
Thank you, and I'll bring that back. I'll bring that back to personnel and to our partners as well. Thank you for that.
Well, we really appreciate it. They did a great job. Twice I was out very late at night outside the house and saw patrols going by, and some on foot. So fantastic. But the one thing that I would like to just bring forward, and would have to leave to your judgment, Chief, since I'm not law enforcement, but I do know that members of our community do get a little concerned about our police department becoming quote-unquote militarized, looking militarized. Given all the work that you have done in community outreach to be approachable, I would just say let's exercise some caution in how this is applied.
And certainly this is something that we actually have discussed, not only at the command level, but also with officers in the agency as well, and that certainly is not the case. It's certainly not the image that we want. We're looking at several things in relation to the personnel carrier, which would first and foremost be officer safety. And
Amen.
Understanding that when you provide safe space for officers to conduct their business in, it tends to reduce the amount of anxiety and maybe the rapid approach or onset of lethal force. So when you build those spaces for them to operate in, it has a tendency to lower that anxiety. And that's what we're looking to do. That's what we're looking to do with our tasers. That's what we're looking to do with the various platforms that we have, the training platforms that are going on, and certainly the equipment that we're looking on getting as well. So it's not a push to become militarized or to distance ourselves from the public, but rather really to provide the appropriate equipment so that our officers can operate in a high capacity, in a well-functioning capacity, in a capacity where they are safer, where they feel safer, and where they will be safer.
Well, I appreciate that explanation, because I think it's great that the public just now got it.
Certainly.
So hopefully that will alleviate some of the fears or concerns that have been expressed to me.
And it's good to hear.
I will say again that, you know, the circumstances under which they have often worked have been tenuous, and this latest incident was a good example of being able to resolve a situation with no one getting hurt.
And it's actually good for the officers to hear too. So, you know, thank you for considering their proposal.
Chief, I have no problem with this. I have no problem with you being the designee, so whichever is more appropriate yeah, I'd recommend move forward.
The designee for the MOU?
The designee
And
for-
then the mayor and/or his designee, which would be the city administrator, for the approval
Right.
of
Well,
securing the equipment.
My understanding was you are the designee for the MOU,
Yes, sir.
correct? Okay, so the designee for securing the equipment, as it comes available,
To fast track it.
right, for the
Is that what
future,
you're
rather
saying?
than it being the mayor, it
You
would
need it, you
be
get it.
chief of police, or mayor or designee. I think
Okay.
I'd be fine with either one.
Understood.
So we're giving
Understood.
you that auction paddle, that you hold up. Is that right? Yeah,
Right.
something like that.
I'd like the opportunity to discuss that with the mayor, and then we'll
Sure.
try to include that in the final version.
Again, whichever helps us be as nimble as we
Right.
can be.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson, I appreciate that.
No helicopters, please. Thank you.
Understood.
I'm comfortable with whatever
For
the
now.
administration decides.
Yeah. All right, then are we comfortable with this moving forward to legislative session?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. And, Chief, if you'll stay with us, next item we have is the acceptance of WINTIF funds.
So this would be $15,000, and if council remembers, we accepted $5,000 earlier in this calendar year from WINTIF towards the purchase of a new canine. This particular $15,000 is earmarked for the additional monies needed to purchase the canine and the training, in addition to outfitting a vehicle to be used by the new canine team.
And as we currently budget, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that our budget and the way we typically receive donations for the feeding and care for the canine, we have sufficient funding for care and training throughout the year in our operating budget for 2 canines, is that correct?
Yes, we budgeted for 2.
Okay, so this is purely for the purchase of and initial training of the canine? the second
That's correct, that's correct. And various pieces of equipment utilized in the vehicle, such as the computer system, the in-car camera, the door hot popper, those items.
I have no other questions. Any other questions related to the acceptance of the WINTIF funds for the canine? And with council consensus, this will move forward to legislative session?
Yes, and
Yes.
I'd like to put in yet another plug for the Community Foundation Fund that we have for the canines. So any of you folks watching out there on PAC 14 would like to support this really fine unit of our department and support our officers, both two-legged and four-legged. This is a great thing for you to make a contribution to. It really is. We've needed this for a long time, and I'm very glad to see it come to fruition and appreciate the work of both the canines and their handlers on it.
Thank you, appreciate that very much.
Chief, thank you.
All right,
Thank you, Chief.
thank you.
Final item on our agenda today is the false alarm ordinance and the enhanced call verification element of the false alarm ordinance. Mr. Stevenson, do you have anything you want to introduce here?
I would like to go through this briefly if I could. As the council will recall, you've presented and proposed this use of enhanced call verification in the past. I don't think that's really what's holding us up here. As council is aware, under the enhanced call verification requirement, what would occur is that a second call would go out to typically a cell phone to verify that we have an actual call that requires a response. It's important to remind the council that this ECV requirement does not apply to fire, EMS, or intruder dispatch requests, so it's only the activation of an alarm. So I don't think that was an issue in the past. We also, based on discussions from the council during the last review of this particular piece of legislation, we did add an opportunity for an appeal of fees that was added in on line 25, I'll take you to page 1 of the ordinance, and I'd like to go through this if I could, because this thing has been floating around since before in my time in this role. So if we could go to page 1 of the ordinance, line 25, you'll see where the appeal opportunity was added there. The panic alarm in line 28, that was taken out because they are allowed. We've added section on page 2, section 150, which is the piece specific to enhanced call verification. On page 3, there are some improvements to definitions. And I'll spare you the details of going through all of those unless the council would like me to do that. Made some minor changes there based on discussions during various reviews of this particular piece of legislation. If there are no questions, I'll move on.
I would just like to know, prior to this appearing in our briefing packet, did you, administration, work with our city attorney as far as the language issues and form, or, was his review of this confined to it appearing in the briefing packet?
Mr. Tomlinson reviewed the entire document and comfortable with its content.
All right.
Okay. So we've got those 3 changes to the definition on page 3. And I would also note that we took the liberty of making some grammatical changes and went through and fixed capitalization and those sort of things. Nothing in particular on page 4.
I'm sorry, can we? Never mind, I'm sorry, 4 is fine.
Okay. Nothing in particular on page 5 on line 163. There was the inclusion of language that says in the case of denial, the police department shall notify the applicant that he may appeal the denial, and this is for an application, and set forth a procedure for that appeal. The procedure for appealing the denial of a license shall be established by the police department. As I said, again, some capitalization. Moving on to page 6.
Could I ask a question there?
Yes, ma'am,
With
page
appeal,
6.
I'm not sure where it would go, or we're in the definitions still, no, we're out of the definitions. Yeah, there's an appeal for denial of license, but we still don't have the appeal for a fine.
Well, we added the appeal opportunity
I don't think.
for the fee. Well, if a fine is issued, if we issue a citation, the appeal, if you will be the opportunity to request adjudication at district court.
Okay.
So that's not something that you could appeal to a board or the city administrator. That would ultimately go to district court.
But would the fine and the fee be the same route to appeal? If they're connected, if you're gonna incur a fine and a fee, is that the same route, or do you have to appeal the fee to the city and the fine to the court?
Yes. Two entirely different things.
So I didn't see an opportunity to appeal the fee.
That's it's on the next page in 7.
Okay.
804060 appeals, starting on lines 230 through 237. That's where we included the opportunity to appeal the fee.
Okay, I guess I was looking for the fine part in the, okay.
Does
yes,
that help?
you're-
The fine would have to go to district court.
You're right, that's what was disconnected in my brain, why I was thinking we still didn't address all of it, but, okay.
Okay. So you see the provision there on page 7 for an appeal. Page 8 on line 270, we took out the provision for panic alarm or the prohibition of the panic alarm.
I'm sorry, before you go to page 8, on page 7, under police department actions and fire department actions, let's use police department actions for example. If the police department is unable to respond to the alarm location, the central monitoring station will be notified of the problem. It will be the alarm company's responsibility to have someone check the building or to notify a representative of the business of the situation. The alarm company's responsibility to have someone check the building, that's pretty vague, and, you know, I don't know that an alarm company has the wherewithal to check a building. So I mean, in my mind, we could even scratch that piece of it and to say, notify a representative of the business of the situation, because if the police department can't check it out, then it ought to be on the business owner,
Yeah, but what are we
not the alarm company. I mean, alarm companies, Chief, if I'm wrong, correct me, but I wouldn't think an alarm company would have the ability or training to send someone out to check the building, other than the police department or the business owner.
Can I see the?
Yes, absolutely.
It's on 8.04.07.
owner go and investigate a
I was
burglary
gonna
alarm
say,
or a
if-
fire alarm either.
So what do we, what do we do
I'm
in
not
this
comfortable with
situation?
this section.
Or, yeah,
at all.
or fire, it's the same issue.
Yeah, I don't know that the alarm companies have the ability to provide that sort of response, and I can tell you that for the very short time that I worked in the private sector, we frequently had after-hours alarms, and the alarm company would call us and say, you know, police department's on their way, they'll get there, but you need to go out as well. And,
Yeah, this-
and normally,
Yeah,
it's
that's
a representative
that's a
from the company
safety issue for
meets
me.
the officer on site to help with the.
But this is
Right.
abdicating, they're saying, oh, we're too busy, it's storming, we're not coming. I'm not comfortable with that
Well,
at all.
it is weather-related activation of alarms, so it just, I mean, I guess
But
it,
how do you tell until you're there?
well, I don't know, but this only pertains legally to weather-related activation of alarms, so it doesn't pertain to other things. But
We're talking about like a severe windstorm or something like that, where every alarm in town
is going off.
Yeah.
But I guess
I
Yeah,
think
but how do
that's,
you
my
tell
my
when
issue is
it's
That may
still
have
with
been the
the,
intent, but that isn't how it comes off, and we wouldn't really necessarily know that. Because crime doesn't stop just because the weather's bad, as we unfortunately have seen the worst happen during Hurricane Sandy here in town. So, I do have a little bit of heartburn with that, simply from the standpoint of if an alarm goes off, putting an untrained person in an emergency response situation would give me cause for concern.
well, except that the language here says that the police department is unable to respond. So this only applies if they are simply unable to go for whatever, and again, this might be a situation where we're in the middle of a hurricane.
right.
And they've got a lot more important things to worry about.
So in this pretty narrow situation. of
It's what it's intended for.
Right.
If
Well,
it's
I
not
think we
working.
need to be somewhat clearer that
Like-
it's been ascertained that that's what the problem is.
And saying, and referring to have someone check is pretty vague in terms of, you know, our ordinance. So I would, you know, my issue, again, just narrowly is the have someone check the building.
Well,
Seems so vague.
I say we leave that out and just say that it'll be the alarm company's responsibility to notify the representative of the business of the situation. In other words, I'm really sorry, but we just can't do it for you right now. I mean, that's really what you wanna say. You don't wanna,
Right.
but I agree, you don't wanna make, like, you've gotta go out there and get in a gunfight with it.
Right.
Well, not only that, when we're in there, that kind of situation, we're telling them to stay home, stay off the roads, and then we're gonna say,
Yeah.
go check your building?
Well, we're just gonna tell them that what
Yeah,
the
I
situation.
think your suggestion regarding it's their responsibility to notify is the proper process and language for it rather than what's here.
I'm not really sure you want to legislate whose responsibility it is to go out there. You just want to say that the company's going to tell everybody what the situation is, and that's it. In other words, I had an alarm system, but today it's useless. That's really.
Chief, do you see any alternatives here? Or have a recommendation?
That last
Yeah, I mean, I think
I'm not-
you take out the alarm company's responsibility to respond and just have the monitoring company
Notification.
advise the business owner, for example, that the police department is unable to respond, like Mr. Tillman suggested.
For whatever reason.
Well,
and then that last line, that shall relieve the police department of, or the police department is relieved of any responsibility to respond to that alarm. I would think that there would be some kind of a list as you got through them, and you would go through that to see if it was an actual problem, as people were available. To put that in there really, to me, makes it sound like we're just saying, yep, not my problem. I just don't like the way that sounds.
I would,
End of that.
if this language exists in other jurisdictions, I'd like to see what the police department is capable of doing in that jurisdiction. I know that when we are busy, we prioritize our calls. We eventually do respond out to the scene. It may take some time, but certainly we just don't say, well, we're not going to go to that call. We would still own that responsibility. It may just take us some time to get there.
In your opinion, then, is the line 247 and 248, is that an unnecessary phrase, or that doesn't reflect standing operating procedures, correct?
Correct. That's absolutely a correct statement with respect to how the police department operates.
I would recommend that we scratch.
Fire department too on that.
The fire department language is the same.
It's the same language, only with the fire department.
And I think it was all lifted from somewhere else, wasn't it?
So, yeah, I would recommend that we scratch to have someone check the building or on line 245 and 246, and the entire sentence on line 247 and 248, and the corresponding segments in paragraph B, fire department actions.
Mr. Council President, will you say that for me again, please?
I would recommend that we, on lines 245 and 246, we strike to have someone check the building or, and on lines 247 and 248, strike the entire sentence beginning once and ending alarm.
Thank you.
Just to give you some perspective on these types of calls, we generally request a key holder respond out. Now, in a lot of cases, that's not possible. And certainly when you're dealing with this narrow scope here with the weather-related event, whether it's wind or ice or whatever it happens to be, we wouldn't expect a key holder to venture out, especially in the event that we've issued an emergency, stay off the roads memo or warning to the public. But that's what we look for, is somebody, a representative of the company that can go through the property with us to determine if there's a problem or not.
Okay.
And under no circumstances will we simply just not respond at all.
Good to know.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. So
So we'll make those improvements too.
and make the improvements to the fire department
Fire
actions.
department as well.
That one's a little more complicated, but I think it can be done.
Sorry to interrupt your flow.
No, it's okay.
Tom.
Too late.
Mr. Stevenson, sorry.
Can we do Tom, please?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you.
We would, in the event that a key holder calls us and waves us off, that would be acceptable, and then we would not respond. But certainly, we would get that information from the alarm company and/or the property owner that we have an established relationship with.
Understood. And I think as a matter of policy, that makes sense. And even if we still strike that last sentence, the once this notification is made, relieving responsibility sentence, you still have the flexibility
Right.
to waive off if.
Well, once
If
we
the key
receive,
holder-
once we receive notification,
Right.
then that changes the dynamics for us.
Can I ask a quick, Chief? Would it be more appropriate in that sentence to say, if the police department is unable to respond to the alarm location in a timely fashion, or from what you're saying is your ultimate goal would be to respond
Absolutely.
eventually?
Absolutely.
So we could just say unable to respond in a timely manner or something like
immediately.
that. Or, yeah, I don't know what word you want to use, but what would be appropriate?
Something that would allow us some flexibility, and alleviate the city's liability, certainly.
Customary time.
Yeah, that might be within a customary response time or some, I assume you have those. I'm not not sure what.
Generally speaking, we could use a reasonable amount of time. If you're comfortable with customary, that's fine.
I'm okay with, I think reasonable, that's.
Right.
That's the way the courts do it, so.
Right. I think reasonable is definitely applicable here.
So unable to respond to the alarm location within a reasonable time, comma.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the rest of it will flow just fine after that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sir?
I have a, sorry, he hadn't finished.
Yeah, Tom, did you have, we were almost through it.
Yeah, we're getting there. Moving on to page 8, we struck 080 of the prohibition of panic alarms. I think Mr. Arrington asked a question on 289 as to whether or not this section should be up at 030, and that's not customary for how these pieces of legislation would be laid out, so we can just strike that and move past it. And then on 317, page 9, we've got the inclusion of the enhanced call verification provision, which we had initially set out to include. So,
I have to leave soon, and I have a number of comments that I sent late this afternoon. I apologize. Comments, questions. Let's start with on line 89, the central monitoring station. One of the concerns that I've heard is that if someone calls up the alarm company and just wants them to install their smoke alarms, they're not hooked up to a regular monitored system, but their reading of this is that they then have to be registered and they have to be monitored if they put them in for them. I was hoping that Mr. Bolts could be here tonight, but he wasn't able to. So I would like to run that by him and see if this still, because we've stricken a lot of language there, maybe that will change, but just a heads up that there was some feeling there that just for them to go, and because they were installing it, it obligated the property owner or user to have some kind of monitoring system, go through all of this, be subject to this. On 100, the digital dialer, there was a question there, should we include internet as well? And I felt that we should. And that brought up another question for me that I've asked before, but I don't know whether we've gotten to check on it. Comcast is offering home monitoring systems, security systems for your home now. Are they registered with us? Are they following these rules?
we've checked into that.
You have?
Yes, we have.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yes, we've checked into that, and the
Okay.
other company as well. And neither of them are registered like they're supposed to be, so we're going to take care of that.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Quickly through mine.
So on 100, should we include the internet? Is that what
I think-
we're suggesting?
Yeah, I don't think that it matters how they're connected. If they're connected and it's gonna generate an alarm that we are gonna have to respond to, it should be included.
Let me just ask there, because it says transmits digital signals from an alarm to a central monitoring station. It really doesn't matter how it's transmitted.
What the
Yeah, can't we
method
just
of.
strike
I don't think we
the-
need to say
Through a
internet.
cell phone.
Yeah,
Can't we just strike
So
from,
strike, okay.
I'd just strike
just
the
end it after
method.
station?
Through the telephone network.
But this is not gonna include if I wire my house to send my cell phone a signal that somebody just opened my door. That's between me and my system, I assume.
Right.
Right, as long
I
as
mean,
it's not.
I can go to the store and buy something that'll call me if somebody opens my front door.
Because-
That is not gonna be covered by this.
That would exclude the central
Okay.
monitoring station.
Right, as long as it's not going to also send a
Central.
text to the police department
Right,
to say,
right.
hey,
It's
somebody
just
just
gonna
walked
tell
in my
me
house.
that somebody opened my front door.
Well, that will give you the choice to call the police department or not.
Um, Down on 141, on page 4. I'm sorry, 139, first of all. I think my word got to. Okay, now it's 141. The 12-month period means 12 consecutive months within a calendar year. Well, are we talking rolling or are we talking calendar? Because that seems to be in conflict. Consecutive would say to me it's a rolling 12-month average. Calendar year is different.
Yeah, this was existing language, so I think we need to clean it up so that
Yeah,
we're
and
clear on
it's-
what we're saying. Chief, did you want to weigh in here? Do you have a? I'm inclined to think that if we work on a calendar year, it's much easier than trying to maintain tracking a 12-month period. It's very complicated.
So is this gonna be tracked in units, because that's a fiscal year?
Aren't we doing calendar year now?
Well, it says consecutive months.
We don't know what we're doing now.
Because I know we get updates of individuals who are filed with the city. And it was my understanding that this was calendar.
That's what we said it was going to be. And the other thing that would reset it would be a changeover in either the company that provides the service or the company that purchases the service. And that would reset your odometer, if you will, for false alarms.
Yeah, we had talked about change in ownership. There is a provision in there for a new system, so even if you had an alarm system for 10 years and you got a new system, you should be allowed that adjustment period again, so.
I thought that's where we went last time, did we not?
Yeah, I mean, so that's in there for the, but it doesn't, actually, it's not real clear. It says for a new system. It doesn't say whether it's, or a new,
New to whom?
yeah,
New
right.
how?
Maybe that's the section then that needs to be tightened up a little bit.
Yeah, so that we might want to look at.
Thank you.
Um,
But do we need to clean up then?
What's the goal? Do we want it to be a calendar year, or do we want it to be 12 consecutive months?
Well, we wanted to go towards simplicity rather than, having the first
Calendar.
alarm.
Right.
Because
be
otherwise you'll have to track it for each and every one.
every alarm in the city.
Way too
They
complicated.
don't
Yeah.
have that
So we'll just say a
capability.
12-month period means a
A calendar
Calendar year.
Right, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Um, let's see, 163, 164, procedure for appealing the denial of a license should be established by the police department. I would rather see that codified so people know exactly what it is, have that laid out in here.
Where are you now?
163, 164. Line 163, under appeals. Or license required, I'm sorry.
So you'd like to see that procedure codified?
Yes.
Okay.
Just because it's all in one place, and we can say, here's the procedure, and this is what you were supposed to follow, and not, well, I didn't know where to get it, or how do or it changed and I didn't know. This way, if the procedure changes, the code changes.
I think part of the reason that those things often don't get attached to the ordinances is it leaves some latitude for making some adjustments when you find that things are not working quite the way that you like. Usually procedures are done at a lower level, just like some of our policies are just passed by resolution as opposed by ordinance. And so I would not have a problem with that staying as is without the procedure being in the ordinance, because it'll make it much easier if they find that they've got a couple of problems. However, I would say that, speaking of cleaning up grammar a little bit here, in the case of denial, the police shall notify the applicant that he may appeal the denial and set forth a procedure for appeal. The way that's structured, it makes it sound like the applicant can set forth a procedure for appeal.
What line are we on, Chair?
I'm sorry, we're in 161, 163. I think it would be better to say, to reverse that a little bit. Shall issue the license, blah, 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 blah. procedure for appealing the denial of a license shall be established by the police department. In the case of a denial, the department shall notify the applicant that he may appeal the denial. Because you've repeated that they're gonna set forth the procedure, in the end of that sentence and in the next sentence, so that's redundant. And then the way it's phrased in the line 162 is it sounds like the applicant can set forth the procedure, and you don't want that, certainly.
Yeah.
I'm sure some applicants would love that, but, so that needs to be restructured a little bit and could be fixed simply by putting a procedure for appealing the denial of a license shall be established by the police department, come first on line 161, and then say, in the case of a denial, the police department shall notify the applicant that he may appeal. Or just, leave it there and say, in the case of denial, the police department shall notify the applicant that he can appeal according to a procedure established by the police department. That would be another way to do it.
Thank you.
Then on
Fewer words.
172, the alarm companies provide list of users to the police and fire departments. As far as I'm aware, that's not actually happening. And we've had some previous discussion about whether that was necessary. I know the alarm companies have issue with it. Chief?
I'm sorry, I was trying to take some notes on the last revision.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Where were you? Forgive me.
Line 172.
172,
Okay.
providing a list of users.
Does the department have a perspective on whether or not that's an important part of the ordinance?
And we're talking about the list of approved and licensed or permitted?
No, this is a provision, this is about the provision of a list of names and addresses of all persons to whom alarm systems have been sold, leased, rented, or given.
That essentially registers the user with the police and fire departments through the alarm company. That's, in effect, what it does.
Right. It's helpful to have, although I'd have to look into the history as to why it's been done that way. And I would ask that you give me some time to figure that out. Certainly I can come back to you on it, or I can email.
Yeah, and I'm wondering why it's necessary, really, because if you're talking with the alarm company, they have the information for you, so.
Other than not being able to get that, I don't know if the alarm company can release that upon request.
Well, that was their issue with it, is that there were some issues about, I believe that was part of the problem anyway, was about releasing that information, their relationships with the customer, and now they've got to get a signed release and release all this other information, and I don't know, and when last we spoke about it, it wasn't happening anyway, so I'm not sure if it hasn't been happening.
We do get a list.
Okay.
From finance.
From some, but I don't know about from all of them. Do you know that the alarm companies are all giving you a list of all their customers?
I can't say that standing here before you right now.
Yeah, that's
I'd have to look that up, but I know that we get an updated list regularly from finance.
For customers, not alarm companies.
I'd have to check.
Okay.
My recollection, the last time I looked at this was a couple of months ago, and the list was quite extensive. So, but I can't stand here and tell you right now whether that was just alarm companies or whether that was individuals. It is helpful for us, certainly when we're responding to medical situations, emergency situations, things like that, to know who's supposed to be on the property and who's not. So there is a benefit to it, but I don't know why historically we have requested that data and received it.
On this issue, let's give Chief time to research that and the importance of that. And if we want to protect that and keep it in here, then we can. And if it's superfluous, extraneous, then we'll scratch it.
It seems like a lot of work for them.
And she finally you need to go.
Okay, let's
Okay.
move on.
Thank you for your help.
Absolutely.
Could you go to line 312, please, and 311 and 312? Does that sentence make sense to you all? I think the word unnecessary could be taken out of there.
I've got to go.
Yeah.
So maintain the premises and the alarm system in such a manner that will minimize or eliminate false alarms.
As opposed to the word unnecessary false alarms,
Or a necessary false alarm,
as
yes.
opposed to just a regular false alarm.
Exactly.
The absolutely critical false alarm.
That's an SAT question on redundancy.
Yes, it is.
Department of Redundancy Department.
Department, yes.
I think the rest of them can be basically,
You sent me the
Discussed,
list,
yeah,
and
from
I
your-
can work on that.
with the exception of the fine issue being a blanket up to $1,000. I mean, we were.
Yeah, my feeling
Here
on
we
that.
got a fee and a fine of whatever.
Yeah, my feeling on that is the up to $1,000 is the same language used in virtually every part of our ordinance and virtually every part of every other ordinance in any other city on any topic. So I don't think there's any reasonable argument for saying the up to should be stricken, because that's used everywhere.
Well,
on
that's for
every-
the discretion of a judge.
Okay,
Right.
Chief,
To
thank
decide
you.
if this person
Thank you,
has
Chief.
so egregiously violated the law that you want to sock it to him or not.
Yeah.
And I thought we talked about this before, perhaps I didn't share it. Our own code only allows us to go up to $500
Yeah.
for a misdemeanor, so
Isn't that what it says now?
I thought it said 1,000.
It does say 1,000.
It says,
Where,
still says
what
So we
line
need
are you
to
looking
reduce
at?
it to 500.
What line are you looking at? There where it says 1,000? Because I'm looking under
haven't
the
noted.
operating without a license penalties. They are in compliance.
Under
with
two,
our code.
on line 216,
216.
it says a fine
Yeah,
of
there it is.
up to
I probably
$1,000.
just missed that.
Can we make that up to 500
Yeah.
Yeah.
for each fence?
Our code is maxed out at 500, but
Yeah, it
23A
was-
allows you to go to
I missed
1,000.
it there.
We've got to, I think we've got to allow that flexibility that, I mean, and maybe there are circumstances where the maximum wouldn't be used, but I feel like because that language is what they use in all parts of our ordinance, or what's used, or in all parts of
Yeah,
our
it's
code,
just-
excuse me.
500 makes more sense than, up to 1,000. That was a wide range for, from anywhere from 3 alarms to 20 alarms. How are you gonna keep the continuity there?
You said Article 23A allows us to go up to 1,000.
To 1,000.
You know, that might be something we want to change in our beginning code, is to agree with what the state law gives us the latitude to do.
State law gives us latitude to go up to 1,000
1,000,
3A, but we limit ourselves to 500.
We
Yeah.
might want to rethink that.
Yeah,
Is my point.
I think
Because
we
there are
talked about
some
that.
abuses.
So what's is the best thing then to be in line with our code today at 500?
Well, we
and-
have to.
And to do
We
blanket,
have to do it.
and if we want to adapt everything to 3A, then shift it all from 500 to 1,000?
I think that would be the appropriate way to go,
Okay.
because right now, everything else says 500 is our limit, but that was done a very, very long time ago. The
$500
cost
is
of
not our money.
services when they get abused has gone up substantially, and that's really, I mean, Mr. Tillman said it well, when the judge says, I've got an egregious person here who needs to really get
Be able to
slapped.
use the maximum, right?
To be able to do that, I think is important for some of the places where we have this in the code, because there are people who abuse things.
Sure.
And cost the other taxpayers who aren't offending a lot of money.
my other was a question on 31516. Kind of sounds like there needs to be a definition for key box entry system code provisions. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Either needs to be clarified that they're talking about giving access to the key code box, or we need a definition. I'm not sure what the term code in there means. Like a PIN code, or does it mean codified?
Oh,
What's the line number again?
315 and 16.
I think it's a PIN number for the key box. That's
Yeah.
what they're talking about. But
But we probably, the word provisions should probably come off there.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
Key box in accordance with the key box entry code.
I mean, aren't they usually referred to as access codes?
Yeah,
That might be a clearer way to put it. The system control keys or access codes are safely secured in the facility's key box in accordance with.
Key box and
I guess what they're
access.
saying is if there, I guess what they're saying is if there's some provision that says, you know, we store the access code within, I guess written within the panel or something?
Well, they usually provide it, like Sassafras Meadows, the fire department and the police department have that code. They know how to get to that box to get the key to open the door in an emergency.
How about
But
we have,
this makes it sound like we have guidelines for how to do that, and we
how
don't.
about
But
we
the
have-
other thing that this
May
says
I-
is, yes.
Ensure that the alarm system control keys or access codes are safely secured at the facility in accordance with the entry system's provisions.
I think that makes a lot of sense. The only reason that I would say that the specificity of being within the facility's key box is called out in my mind is that that's where the fire department or the police department upon arrival is going to look for, if they need that access code, they're going to go to the key box. But I guess if there's some other provision, as long as it's laid out and there's a standard.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you say if it's safely secured, I mean, we could get input from the fire and police on this, but safely secured at the facility in accordance with,
the alarm provider's system.
I mean,
code
is it
provision?
just a key box? See, I don't know enough about.
see,
the
that's
system.
what I was wondering.
Because if it's
is that-
secured in the facility's key box, we could stop there. If that's what they're really saying, is that the
if you go back to line 118, it says key box entry system means a device designed to safely secure keys or other information for use by the fire department personnel to quickly gain access to the control panel. And I think that's for the access to the alarm panel.
Yeah, but it does, there's no provision for how to, I mean, that word provision, code provision, it's just.
Yeah, I
So
think,
maybe
I think that's
take that
articulated
code
in
as-
the fire code provisions when they have to have that key box. But I can see where you're saying it's not clear, and I may know that, but everyone else may not know
Is that part of the, like, the insurance company's requirements?
Yeah, that's what I'm.
It seems like,
confused about is
to me, it
whose
seems like we
requirements
can
are
eliminate those last two words, code provisions. Because we have a definition of the words that appear before that, key box entry system. So by virtue of that that definition, they're safely secured in the facility's key box in accordance with the key box entry system, which is defined earlier. I don't know what
And
the
I can
heck
ask-
that code provisions means.
Yeah, I can ask the chief to, Chief Hoppus to
If
weigh
he's
in on
okay
that.
with that,
and
I
help
say
us
we can take those
My
last.
clarify that for
my
us a little bit.
question would be whether or not it needs to apply to the police as well, or to others who might be doing this, whose responsibility it is to respond to these things. So I don't know whether they have a different methodology in the fire department from what the police use.
Well, in the definition for key box, it speaks only to the fire department.
Fire, okay.
So I think it's
There
for
you
the
go.
alarm panel.
Okay.
But I'll get an answer on that.
Yeah.
So we're
Thank you.
comfortable.
Good. It would have been nice to have the alarm guy here tonight. He would have
Yeah.
been very helpful
Yeah.
to us.
Does this have an opt-out clause for people who want a response and are willing to pay if there's a false alarm? This doesn't have any kind of an opt-out clause?
When you say opt out, that would essentially mean that each time there was a false alarm, you're willing to pay for the service.
I want the
essentially,
response on the first,
No matter what.
no matter what.
I'll pay whatever the.
Oh, for the ECV, I mean,
No. Oh, did you mean?
It's call
Did
verification.
you mean the opt out of the ECV alone, or opt out of being subject to sort of the punishment scale, and instead on call one, I don't care, I'll pay a fee, whatever I have to pay.
Well, that's what the ECV is designed to eliminate, is by having a call to a second party, they try to intercept that it's a false alarm. But there may be businesses, elderly citizens, whatever, who don't want you to take the time to do that. They want the response.
So specifically opting out of the ECV.
Yes, this does not contain any kind of an
No,
opt-out.
not so far.
That might be something we want to consider putting in there, just because.
Can we ask Mr. Bolts or one of the alarm folk?
I'll
to
email
offer-
Ron and ask him
Okay.
if it's being done elsewhere.
Yeah,
and if
because there
are
might
any
be
drawbacks
a
or
piece
challenges.
of language.
Yeah,
we could
I'd
just
like
insert.
some information about that, because that subject got raised, I think, when this first came up. And a couple of folks I know who have alarm systems, I'm not gonna mention any names or companies though, did say, part of the reason I got the alarm system was, I want you there, Johnny, I don't want you to waste any time trying to find people. I got the alarm system so that somebody would come. So, I thought, well, yeah, that's something to consider. I hadn't thought of that. So.
That was debated when Delaware passed this mandatory ECV, and the studies were that it literally was seconds, and I understand that seconds do make a difference. But generally, they're calling one while they've got the finger on the dial for the, and they let it ring two times, and they hang up. And I guess if you want to opt out, don't answer the phone when your alarm company calls. But that still, they're spending the time.
It's a technique. It's a technique.
Okay, well, thank you for your guidance. Maybe we can get this thing finished up.
So, then, although we have some standing questions and pieces being investigated, is everyone comfortable with, once this is polished, this coming to legislative session?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thanks for everyone for your hard work on that.
General discussion. I know it's late.
General discussion, did you have something?
I know everybody wants to leave, including me. Number one, I was looking at the requested agenda items list dated June 24th, and it goes all the way up through October 27th, and I do not see redistricting on here. I just wanted to ask, do we have a target date? I'm getting very concerned about this because time is of the essence with the courts.
I've sent an email. This is not a very complete answer, but I've sent an email to the mayor and just asked when he would be bringing it back. Mr. Stevenson, do you have an update?
I do not,
Okay.
but I will check with the mayor tomorrow.
Because it was my understanding that the mayor was waiting on us to make a decision as to whether we were going to leave things as is or whether we were going to move with his plan or some version of it. I know we've been contacted by the ACLU. The newspaper reported on it that the public found it a big yawn, which I thought was an interesting headline because we didn't have much response. But at the same time, they said, this will bring racial equality or proportionality to the council. The fact of the matter is, the one that was passed did that too. So that's really not an issue anymore as far as making that decision.
Right.
But this really does need to move because otherwise it's going to come down to, we waited so long, we're going to have to go with the mayor's plan because, that way if there's any conflict with the ACLU, it'll take less time in the court or whatever.
I have called, I called the ACLU just to try and work out how we would coordinate it. And that sort of led to a sort of a bizarre conversation, but ultimately I called the Justice Department, and believe it or not, I have called the Justice Department about 6 or 7 times and spoken to several assistants there and can't get anybody who really can help me. And they tell me who should be able to help me, but that person doesn't call me back. So, and my reason for calling them is that even though technically if you read the order and you accept the order literally, if we change the number of districts, or the number of representatives in the district. Certainly with regard to the minority district, we're supposed to go back to the court. But where you're actually increasing the representation within the minority district, it seems to me that we have more than met the requirements of the law. In other words, I mean, you can't argue that you're discriminating against a group of people who are giving greater representation rather than less.
Good point.
That is a good.
So that's why I called them and I said, you know, if that's the case, maybe you have an opinion that we don't need to do anything because it would just be a waste of everyone's time. But I can't get anyone to speak to me, so that's where I am right now. But I mean, I think we do need to fish or cut bait.
Right.
I would like to bring everyone's attention to that letter and to the specific test cases that the letter refers to. When one thinks Louisville, one thinks Louisville, Kentucky. However, the Louisville that they had the case with in just before 2000 was in Louisville, Alabama, population 730. And they changed that to a 5-district area. 10 years later, the census in Louisville, Alabama was, 730, and then 10 years later, the census in Alabama, that town in Alabama was 530. So in that 10-year period, you know, almost half of the, or a third of the people left. And there has to be a reason for that, you know? You take an area that has 700 people and you put it into 5 districts, what are you really trying to do? And it just struck me very, very strangely.
Yeah, but it's also equally strange and absurd to suggest that districts would have anything to, I'll bet I could pull up all the demographics on that town, and I'll bet it has nothing to do with it. I'm sure the economics in Louisville, Alabama would have everything to do with what's happening there. So I think that's I think it's absurd to say those things are related.
Okay.
It's an opinion, but I mean, we could probably pull up all the numbers and analyze that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, cities of all size have many districts.
At the individual income of the people in the area as well, and that dropped like a stone as well. But anyway, that's I wanted to point out those test cases that were sort of, I don't know, they just didn't leave me sitting right or feeling right about what they were asking for.
Well, you know, and I didn't mean to have the entire redistricting discussion here. I just wanted to point out that it was not on the schedule and it needs to get on the schedule.
Agreed.
There were other things within that letter that I found a little odd. But I mean, you know, essentially what they said was what you came up with isn't optimal, but they didn't say it was bad either.
And this is one organization's opinion about our decisions. I mean,
yeah,
and I realize.
And I respect them greatly.
Sure.
You know, I was a member years ago, and I have friends who have served with them, and so on. So, you know, that's kind of neither here nor there. But, you know, there wasn't anything in that letter that said, this is wrong. This is just dead wrong,
Right.
and how dare you, and all that. The other thing I wanted to bring up was the issue of the fire agreement. Some time ago, I had requested a draft of it. And I understand that the mayor is within his rights to say that's an executive matter and I don't have to provide you with agreement. And I'm sorry Ms. Mitchell left because I don't want this to appear to be talking behind anybody's back, which is kind of hard to do on PAC 14 to the public. I am concerned that a candidate for county council is also representing the city in a mediation because you know, nothing personal. I'd be saying the same thing if this were Mr. Spees. It just seems awkward, I think, to have somebody who has a vested interest in the county's business by being a candidate for that office.
Sure.
Also be representing the city's interest on a mediation team.
I think that's a fair point. I also, and this is just a guess, I don't think that mediation team will meet until after an election.
That could
Unfortunately.
That could well be, but I don't think that that's an appropriate appointment there, and especially if one member of the council now is privy to the draft of the fire agreement, it seems to me that as equal partners on here that we
Is
should
there a
also-
draft of the fire
It's
agreement?
not been shared.
Okay. Is that something all of council could see at some point?
I mean, it just seems to me, I understand the rationale about drafts.
Or
I
in
do.
closed session?
But if we are going to have to make a determination, ultimately, wouldn't it be better to get buy-in on certain points before going into the mediation so that everybody is working, together?
And we're talking about, if we weren't talking about something that, didn't have such a tremendous impact on our budget,
Huge.
then, I might say, okay, let's just let the negotiation team figure it out, and then send us a recommendation, but this is enormous.
And I'll use the wastewater treatment plant as an example, that the mayor and the council decided on things that we could be a united front on. And I think that's the same situation here,
I think it is too.
especially given, as you point out, the sum of money involved.
I have one more thing too. We, in a certain neighborhood of town, has been subject to a number of burglaries of late. And one of the things that we spoke with the state's attorney not long ago regarding the concept of trespassing. And state law calls for an actual posting of an area with a sign that says no trespassing or keep out or whatever. Instead of there being something along the lines of, well, if you don't belong here, you don't belong here, which I feel is the case. If someone's in your yard, they're there either with business or with malintent in mind. I wonder if there's some way that we could have or codify something along those lines that, if you're in someone's fenced backyard, that you are indeed trespassing without that being, posted on a sign.
Mr. Tillman,
I think we have the ability to be more stringent with state law as opposed to,
add to versus subtract from.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Can we think about that for a bit? Because I'm really disturbed
some
to
research.
I'm really disturbed to go up a street and see a bunch of no trespassing signs on front porches. That bothers me immensely.
I agree with your sentiment. My only issue is normally, we can't contradict state law. And state law protects the property owner, but it also protects the person who might wander onto your property not knowing that they're trespassing. Or someone who's passing, so I think that's why they generally require the notice, but I'll look into it.
I think you're right, because we've sort of been down that road before when we were talking about safe streets and, various things that could be done.
Clearly, if they come into your house, they're breaking and entering, that's another
Well, that's
story.
passing
But
the claim.
if they're crossing over a piece of your yard or something like that,
Right.
the law wants to protect that person's, from their own ignorance, I guess, that they might be trespassing on your property, but I'll look into that.
But that could be adjudicated if the property owner had an issue. Otherwise, I would rather see that the property owner has the larger safety net here.
I'll look into it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have two other things.
I have to go.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
The quorum is about to-
Can we really fast?
Can I,
Really
I'll mention
super
real
fast?
quick. Number one, the Traffic and Safety Committee has come up with a recommendation to mayor and council that there not be parking on a particular portion of Pinehurst. There was some communication with the university. I did a little follow-up on that. They thought that we meant like all parking on public streets while they're doing their construction. They're not disturbed by that little portion of Pinehurst winding up with a restriction. I'd like to see us move that forward.
We can do no parking signs, right?
Yeah, because what's happening is we've had a couple of at least anecdotal incidents of mirrors getting clipped and people nearly getting hit, getting out, and it's mostly transient students who are not permitted, so we've obviously had a lack of enforcement. Bottom line is that area is very heavily thoroughfared between Camden and Route 13. And then the last thing is, I'm getting questions, I'm not making any accusations, but I am getting questions about press releases about our grant system for funneling through the state funds for revitalization grants downtown, being on political letterhead or having an authority line of Ireton for Maryland. If we could just find out, is that being copied? Because I don't remember seeing the press releases on city letterhead, and it's...
I've seen press releases on city letterhead.
They usually are.
Yeah.
City letterhead.
That-
Yeah, and
even
this
even
one
community
I did
legacy.
not- This one I don't recall seeing.
Community
but-
legacy.
Excuse me?
Community legacy.
I think so.
Yeah. I thought I saw Community Legacy one go out.
All right, and maybe it's just been recopied onto this thing, but for the, most people aren't paying attention, but for the couple of people who talked to me, it was like, well, where does the city end and where does the politics pick up? And since I didn't see it on city letterhead, I just said, well, I'll ask.
I thought I did.
On letterhead?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so as well.
The $100,000.
So it may just be that the political committee is picking it up and then issuing it out on their authority line, but anyway, I just wanted to get that
Oh,
cleared
I have a
up
note.
so that I can answer these people properly.
And what is this political committee, one might ask?
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're adjourned.